Welcome to Mr. Nightbleed. Tonight, in 5 haunted American cemeteries, where ghosts actively appear, we return to those quiet corners of the world, where the footsteps of the living fade, and only the wind moves among the graves. These are stories buried in stone and soil, cemeteries that whisper, monuments that bleed history, and resting places that refuse to rest. Every story you're about to hear is real, taken from those who stood before these cemeteries and saw ghosts actively appearing in the moonlight. My goal this month is to reach 4,000 subscribers. Almost 90% of viewers come in, listen, and vanish into the dark without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Join the darkness. Subscribe now. Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what hour of the night it is for you. And if there's a cemetery in your town that truly unsettles you, type its name below. Because when the world sleeps and the soil settles, some things beneath it do not rest. Kill the lights, silence the world, take a slow breath, and we begin. My name is Claire, and I'm from Georgetown, Colorado. I rent a little 2-bedroom on a short street that runs parallel to the creek. The house is old enough to complain when the wind hits it, which I kind of like. It has a front porch with a loose board on the second step, and my landlord keeps saying he'll fix it and then forgets. Across the road, sort of diagonally, there's a cemetery. It's small, pocket-sized is how my neighbor calls it. It's been there since the 1870s. Back when this town was mostly mines and horses. There's a split-rail fence around it that has started to lean, and wild grass presses up against it like it's trying to help hold it together. Near the entrance, somebody keeps it neat, but if you walk farther in, it gets tangled. The stones tilt. In some spots, the ground sinks a little when you step. It doesn't feel creepy though. It feels like it's supposed to be there. I work at the little mining museum off 6th Street. Behind the park, I'm the museum registrar, which sounds nicer than it is. It's registration forms, hazard logs, small accessions, the cataloging backlog that never ends, all the small, fussy jobs. I open most days, which means I'm at my desk by 8. I make coffee for the volunteer docents if they haven't made it. I write labels. I respond to emails from people who found a pickaxe in their attic and want to know if it's valuable. I'm good at it because it suits the way my brain works. List, check, file, repeat. I walk home around 5. My commute is 5 minutes because everything here is 5 minutes. I cut down a path that goes past the church with the bell. If it's on the hour, it rings and the sound sort of floats over the water. In September, you can hear the tourist train horn from the loop, way off up the hill, and it makes you feel like you're in one of those postcards we sell in the gift shop. I live with Kelsey. She's a coworker. She needed a place when her lease went up out of nowhere last spring, and I had an extra room. We get along because neither of us needs a lot. She works the front desk at the museum, and she's funny in a dry way, which helps with the visitors who want to argue about the price of admission. She cooks when she can, though it's mostly rice and eggs, and those long salads that take up the whole table. At night, after dinner, we sit on the porch if it's not too cold. We watch the cars run past every now and then, watch people walking their dogs along the fence line, and we watch the light go out of the mountains. Kelsey jokes about the cemetery sometimes. She calls the far corner the wild land. She says, if I don't show up for work, I'm probably stuck in the thicket. From our porch, you can see almost the whole little place. There's a gravel path inside that curves around a few family plots and a bench somebody set facing one grave in particular. The bench is dark and shiny from weather, and no one ever sits on it much, except once in a while, a couple of kids will sit there and look like they're daring each other. There's also one grave that sits apart from the others, a little way toward the back, off by a spruce that drops needles all year. It's not far, but it's set enough away that you notice it. I always thought maybe that family didn't get along with the others. A long time gone, and people still doing their thing. On weekends, the town fills up with folks in shorts and expensive boots. They stop at the bakery, and then they wander up and down the sidewalks and take pictures of the painted storefronts. The wind whistles down the canyon most afternoons. It lifts dust and carries the smell of sap and cold water. There are crows sometimes, big ones that sit on the wires and talk to each other. I sweep the porch and the steps because the leaves collect there and scrape along the pavement when it gets gusty, that dry paper sound. The porch light flickers if the dishwasher is running. I keep meaning to ask the landlord if the circuit is overloaded, but then it stops flickering and I forget. The cemetery is just part of the view. You know how you stop noticing stuff that's always there? That's what it was like. I'd see a woman with silver hair walking along the fence and then realize she was there every morning at 7. I'd see the bench, the ordinary stones, the names you see everywhere here. Larimer, Swanson, Mahoney, worn down by a century of wind. I never minded it. It was quiet across the street, and honestly, after working all day in rooms that smell like old paper and dust and machine oil, quiet is nice. It started small. That's what I tell people when they ask me why I didn't do something. There wasn't anything to do at first. It was just small stuff. One Monday in early October, there were flowers on the bench. Not a fancy bouquet, just a handful of yellow ones stuck in a thick glass jar. The kind you get peach preserves in. No water. They were bright in that flat way of mountain light. The grave the bench faced is one I pass every day. The stone is low to the ground, with a little crown carved on top. I never read the name all the way. Something about the letters being worn. And my eyes always landing on the chips and missing the words. I thought it was sweet that someone still remembered that person. Kelsey saw them when she got home and said, "Someone's got a secret admirer." She nudged my shoulder and then she laughed. She does that thing where she laughs mostly with the air in her throat, like she's holding the sound back. We didn't think anything about it. 2 days later, the jar was gone, but another bunch of flowers sat on the dirt. Blue this time. They didn't look bought, more like snipped from a yard, kind of uneven. There aren't many yards with flowers left blooming that late, but some places near the creek still get sun. I figured maybe whoever it was switched out the old ones and took the jar home. The wind pushes stuff around here. You set something down, and you better be ready to pick it up again. I swept leaves that afternoon and thought about the neighbor with the roses 2 streets over. The motion light by our door clicked on a little after 3 in the morning that week. It woke me up because it threw this pale strip across my bedroom. The screen door creaked too, the way it does when it shifts. I got up and edged the blind down, and there wasn't anything there. No foxes, no person, nothing. I could hear the creak. I could hear the radiator knock a little and settle. Then it clicked off. I was tired. That was it. A day or 2 after that, the screen door went again. And then the porch light clicked on, and then off, and then on. Kelsey said, "I think your light's haunted," when we were brushing our teeth, toothpaste on her face, in the corner like a little foam mustache. I said, "It's probably the wind," and we both nodded, but she slept with her door half open that night. On Friday morning, I walked across the street to the fence and looked at the grave in front of the bench. I don't know why. Maybe the blue flowers made me curious. The grass near the path is cut short, but inside the fence, it gets long and soft. It makes your steps quiet. I put my hands on the top of the rail without thinking, and splinters lifted into my palm where the wood's gone gray. The stone was newer than some of the others, but still old. The dates were 1878 to 1879, a baby. The name was smoothed by the years, but I made it out if I tilted my head and let the light hit it low. Maria something. I felt that little hollow feeling I always get when I see a child's stone. I said, "Oh," out loud, and a crow called from the pole like it was answering me. Kelsey started pointing things out. That's kind of her thing, noticing little patterns. She told me, "Those flowers are always there on Wednesdays." She'd been watching, apparently. I said, "No, that's not right." And she laughed and said, "It's not like I'm counting, but they were there Wednesday and last Wednesday and the one before, and I don't see them on Thursdays." I shrugged. People have routines. People visit on their day off. She said the footsteps sound different in the cemetery than on the road, softer, like you couldn't tell how close someone was until they were there. I told her that was just the dirt and the grass. That evening, we sat outside and heard a dog bark down the hill. Then nothing. And the nothing part stood out more than the barking did. I told myself it was the cold bringing everything inside. Later that weekend, I had to go into the museum to check a shipment that came late. I stopped in the gift shop and bought a coffee to go because the coffee station was out of filters. Doreen at the counter liked to talk, but when I asked her who takes care of the cemetery, city, county, church, she put her eyes on the receipt and drawled out, "Different folks," with that pause people use when they don't want to say yes or no. I said, "I just wondered because someone leaves flowers there. It's sweet." She nodded, but she didn't look up. She changed the subject to the new donation drive. When I pressed, she said, "Maybe check with Mr. Daly across from the fix-it shop. He knows all the old stories." And then she turned to a couple who wanted to know if the mining tour was open. I didn't push it. That night the wind got loud. It slammed once against the side of the house and made something in the attic rattle. The insects, the little whiners that hang around the porch light, went silent. I lay in bed and listened. There was a sound like someone walking slowly in gravel. That crunch press, crunch press. Our walkway is gravel. The path inside the cemetery is gravel. I couldn't tell which side of the road it was on. I held my breath. It stopped. Then the church bell chimed once for 9 o'clock, a late chime like the bell forgot and then remembered. The next morning, there were no flowers. There were damp rings on the bench slats, like something wet had been set there. It had been dry overnight, no rain. Kelsey pointed at the rings and raised her eyebrows. "Condensation," I said. "They probably brought them in a damp jar again." We both looked at the empty spot where the jar had been that first time. A couple of chipmunks ran along the fence, chattering like they were yelling at us. Then they went quiet all of a sudden. It felt like a curtain went down. I don't want to make it sound like everything changed right then. It didn't. Life went on the way life goes on. We went to work. I scheduled an HVAC check because the radiator knocking got worse. The delivery guy carried in 3 boxes of mining magazines and told me about his girlfriend's dog. The tourist train blew its horn at 2:30. Kelsey and I made soup. We laughed at a visitor who insisted he was related to a mayor this town never had. Days just keep going. But the small things kept happening. The light snapped on at strange hours. The screen door creaked when the air was still. There were footprints in the dirt by the split rail fence, like someone had stepped there and pivoted. But the prints went nowhere. Fresh flowers on Wednesdays. We spent more time on the porch, looking than talking. The grave that was set apart started to bother me without me knowing exactly why. I realized I hadn't read that stone at all. It sat under that spruce, and the needles made this spicy smell. It looked private. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how it felt. One night, just after we turned off the TV, Kelsey said, "Do you ever hear your name out there?" I said, "From where?" She said, "Out there, like in the street, like someone's on the sidewalk and they say, 'Claire?' Very soft. I heard it. I thought you came home and you were calling me. But it was late, and then it didn't happen again." I shook my head. "You probably heard me on the phone," I said. She shrugged. "I don't think so." She waited a second. It sounded like wind, honestly. Just like when somebody talks into a fan and it flattens out. We cleaned up the bowls. I could hear a train horn drift down from the loop like a memory. The house popped once, that old wood expanding against cold, and we flinched and then laughed at ourselves. After that, when we went to bed, we'd leave the hallway light on. It felt ridiculous. We were grown women. We knew the difference between house noises and people, but the light made the walls look warmer. And I didn't mind the electricity. The next Wednesday had flowers again, this time tucked down low so you wouldn't see them unless you went to the bench. Kelsey said, "It's almost like they're hiding them." We looked around without moving our heads much, which was silly because who would police flowers? At the museum, I pulled the record book that lists local burial plots. It's a bit of a mess. People have made notes in the margins over the years. Some of it is written in this spidery script that looks like it's about to blow away. I found the little cemetery by our street. The entries were sorted by row, and there was a penciled map someone had drawn once and then traced over in ink. The bench wasn't on the map, obviously. That would be newer. But the grave in front of it was. It was Maria Ellis. The Maria I had seen. The date lines matched what I saw outside. The grave that sits apart was listed as Isabel Hart, 1879, but the line across from her name was blank, where the remark would go. The other names had notes, from Jones Ranch, Stone replaced 1952, that kind of thing. The blank bothered me more than it should have. On lunch, I walked to the fix-it shop. Mr. Daly was at the counter, elbow deep in a toaster, the guts spread out on a checked towel. He's one of those people you can't tell if he's older or just always looked that way. He said, "You're from the museum," which people around here say like it's a family you join. I said, "Do you know who puts flowers on Maria Ellis?" He frowned without stopping his hands. "Somebody with a heart," he said. I laughed, but I didn't feel like laughing. "Do you know who takes care of the cemetery?" He shook his head. "Sometimes the church, sometimes the city, sometimes me if the gate sticks." And then he stopped himself, like he'd said a thing he didn't mean to. "There's no real gate," I said. My voice sounded too light in my own ears. He didn't look up. He said, "Those graves aren't what you think they are," like he was telling me the weather. Then he said, "Hand me that flathead, will you?" And he changed the subject to the toaster springs. And after a minute, I handed him the wrong screwdriver and he corrected me. And by the time I left, I couldn't quite say what we'd even talked about. I started keeping a little notebook. I know how that sounds. I wasn't trying to make anything out of anything. I just wanted to see if there was a pattern. I wrote down Wednesday, flowers, yellow. Sunday, light, 3:12 a.m. Monday, voices, probably wind. It made me feel like I was doing something, like it was my job, because that's literally my job, to make lists and keep track of things people forget. I checked the stone under the spruce. Isabel Hart. The lettering was better preserved because it was shaded, I guess. There was a simple carved border. No little lamb or hand pointing upward, like some of the others have. Just the name and the dates. The ground around it was a little sunken in one corner. Not dramatically, just enough that your foot rolled. The spruce shed needles all around, so there was always that soft floor smell. I tried to picture her. You do that sometimes in the museum too, when you're holding a photo of someone, and you want to say what they were thinking, and you know it's just you thinking it. I couldn't bring up anything. It was like trying to remember a dream after a full day. The next week, Kelsey heard footsteps in the gravel path at 2 a.m. "At first I thought it was you in the kitchen," she said. "I heard the chair move." But I had been asleep. The chair was where it always was when I came in to check. There were no footprints in the kitchen, but there were pine needles stuck to the mat inside the front door, where our shoes sit, and neither of us had worn those shoes the day before. They were still damp, like someone had set something wet there, and then lifted it away clean. It smelled like cold dirt in the front hall, in that sharp way it smells when you break the ground before it freezes. Kelsey and I stood and looked down at the mats and didn't say anything for a minute. "This is stupid," she said. And then she laughed because it was. "It's fall. There's dirt. We live across from a cemetery." She bent over to pick up a needle and it stuck to her finger. And when she shook it off, it floated and then landed on her sock and clung there. She said, "Static. Can static do that?" I shook my head. "I don't know," I said. Later that day, the church bell rang twice for noon because the bell ringer must have miscounted, and I jumped both times. Careful, small things started to add up. Someone had unlocked the side door in the kitchen at some point on a Tuesday. Just the chain, not the deadbolt. I know because I pulled the door and it opened a sliver, and I thought, I didn't leave it like that. You get that wave across your shoulders, like a shrug you didn't plan. I closed it. I locked it. Then, when I went to grab a pen, the one I always keep in the cracked mug by the phone, it wasn't there. It showed up later on the little table by the couch where we set the mail. I told myself I'd done it half asleep at some late hour, because what else do you tell yourself? The bench started to look more interesting to me, which is dumb because it's just a bench. But I noticed then that the bench is angled. It isn't straight on. It faces the stone a little off-center, like you'd sit in the left corner to have the headstone right in line with your eyes. It has a small brass plate on the back. I had never read it, which is unlike me. The plate said, "For M from IH, always." The letters were tarnished, and the screws had green rings around them from weather. I stood there with my hands in my coat and read it twice. M.E. and I.H., Maria Ellis and Isabel Hart. That was a coincidence. It's a small place. People know people. It doesn't take much to make a line out of 2 points. At the museum, I looked for any Isabel Harts in our files. We have a donation ledger from the 1990s that reads like a phone book. People give quilts, spoons, letters, junk. I didn't find an IH in that, but I found one in an old box of property deeds the Historical Society had copied sometime in the 70s. The copies are bad and smell like burnt paper from the machine. There was an Isabel Hart listed as a witness on a sale. The address was on my street. I had never thought about the fact the house I live in had other versions of itself under it. Of course it did. The deed papers were thin, and the names looked like they had been dragged across the page by a nervous hand. I put the papers back in the box and sat very still at my desk. The radiator pinged like a coin in a jar. I could hear the docent in the next room explaining the assay office scale to a kid. Everything felt normal. On my break, I walked to the cemetery and stood by the split rail fence. I watched the bench. It was Wednesday. No flowers yet. The sound of the creek came up the street like a constant muffling. A woman walked past with a dog that did not bark, which is unusual for dogs. The dog looked out at the thicket and then away. I watched the place where the path curves by the family plots. It should feel silly to stare at a bench, but it didn't. It felt like waiting for a bus that is always late. Around 3, the motion light by our front door blinked on, then off, in the middle of the day. I saw it as I was walking up, and for a second, I thought someone was inside. But when I stepped onto the porch, I could smell the house. Our house smell. The mix of coffee and laundry and wood. No one was there. The screen door creaked, but didn't move. I put my hand on the knob and listened. The wood settled somewhere deep. A single leaf skittered across the steps like it had somewhere to be. Over the roof, somewhere up the hill, a crow made that harsh sound they make when they're telling another crow off. When Kelsey got home, she said, "Did you rehang the calendar?" I told her no. The calendar that hangs by the back door was off by 1 day. Someone had moved the card forward to Thursday. It was Wednesday. It was small, but it made both of us look at the back door, then back at each other. She said, "I did hear my name earlier, not yours, Mine. Kelsey. She said it like you say your own name to make it normal. I said, "It's the wind funneling down the street. It does weird things. My mom's house had the same kind of thing. It takes the sound and bends it." I was talking too fast, the way I do when I know I'm not convincing anybody, including myself. That night, I couldn't sleep. I got up and went to the kitchen and leaned on the counter and drank water from the tap, hand-cupped under the stream, because the glass was in the dishwasher and I didn't feel like opening it. I stood and listened. The refrigerator hummed. The wood moved in the walls. The porch light flickered even though it was off. I heard a very soft step on gravel, the weight just enough to shift stones. I thought, there is no reason to be afraid of that sound. It's a small sound. Then I heard my name, or I made it up, but it was there, like someone exhaling it. Claire. It came from the back hallway, not from the yard, which made my hands go cold. I waited. I said, "Kelsey?" But the way I said it, I already knew she was asleep. She made a comfortable sleeping sound when she was asleep, a little hum, and I could hear it through her door a second later. I put my glass down and it clicked a tiny click where the water ring met the counter. In the morning, the floor by the back door had an oval of damp on it, just a small patch, not much bigger than my hand. We checked the door. It was latched. The window in the door had a thin film of dust on the inside, like all old windows do. Someone had drawn a line in it and then erased it. That's exactly what it looked like. We stood with our faces close to it and tried to make it into something else. "I don't like this," Kelsey said. She wasn't being dramatic. Her voice was flat, like she was stating a policy. "I don't like it either," I said. We stood there a little longer and then went to work because what else were we going to do? I asked Doreen about it again that afternoon, just a little. She shook her head. "You'll learn not to ask," she said. But then she looked sorry she'd said it like that. "Old things hang around," she added. "Not everything lets you name it. You know that better than me. You, with all your labels." She laughed, and I laughed too, but mine came out wrong. In the records room, I found a thin folder with the address of our house on the tab. The file wasn't an accession. It was tucked in with property records someone had scanned years ago. The front page was a photocopy of a newspaper listing from 1923. Something about a property tax lien. I didn't care about that. The second page was an old hand-drawn map of the block we live on. The footprint of our house was different then, narrower, pushed to one side. Across from it was the cemetery, drawn as a perfect rectangle, even though it isn't. But what made me sit down in the rolling chair was a name on a note paper clipped to the map. It was part of a chain of owners, the way people pass a house down. Transferred from I. Hart, 1902. The same initials as the bench. The handwriting was different from the map later, but not by much. The paper felt brittle. I read it again and then again, like it would change if I read it enough times. When I told Kelsey, she said, "That's not surprising, right? It's a small town." I nodded because that's what you say. We said little things like, "huh," and "weird," and people used to live in their neighborhoods their whole lives. After dinner, we put the dishes in the sink and went outside with our mugs and watched the street. It was calm. The air had that sharp coil to it, like the night might drop below freezing. Our breath had started to show. The porch light flickered and then stayed steady. A couple walked past and said, "Pretty night," and we said, "Sure is." Around 9, there was a voice from the back hallway. I know how that sounds. It didn't sound like a voice from the radio or from a phone. It sounded like a voice the way a house makes a sound that isn't a house sound. It said, very soft, "Maria." I put my mug down. It clinked loud enough that the couple across the street turned their heads. Kelsey and I looked at each other without moving our heads. We stood absolutely still for a beat, like kids playing freeze, and then we both laughed in that too loud way you laugh when you need the laugh to cover the air. I said, "Probably the pipes." The pipes had never said a name before. We went inside. The light in the hallway was on, even though I had turned it off earlier. That weekend, Mr. Daly came over with a screwdriver to fix the porch light because he said the flicker was probably the ballast. He unscrewed the plate with that calm way he has, and he told us about a train his dad used to ride when he was a kid, when the loop was still for hauling ore. He didn't mention the cemetery, and I didn't either. When he finished, he stood at the edge of the porch and looked across the street. "You ladies ever sit on that bench?" he said. "No," I said. "I wouldn't either," he said, and then he wiped his hands on a rag and left. On Sunday, I walked across and went to the grave under the spruce again. It was quiet enough that I could hear the needles fall when the wind nudged them loose. A dog barked far off. Then things went very still, not even a bird. The quiet felt like a nudge against my ear. I read the name. I read it again. I put my hand on the top edge of the stone. It was cold. My skin stuck a little like it does to metal in winter, but it came away fine. I stood there long enough that my toes went numb. When I turned to go back, I tripped on that sunken corner and caught myself on my palm. And when I stood up, I had dirt in my hands. That rich, damp dirt smell you get under trees. I brushed it off and looked around to see if anyone was watching me fall like a fool. No one was. That night, there were muddy prints on the kitchen floor. Not muddy, like someone had waded through a creek. Just a few partial prints, like someone had come in on damp ground and tapped the floor with their toes. They were near the sink, then they were gone, like they'd evaporated. "We should get a mat there," Kelsey said. We both knew that wasn't the point. I checked the museum records again Monday morning, even though I knew I wouldn't find what I was looking for. I pulled the cemetery index and ran my finger down the names. Maria Ellis. Isabel Hart. The page had a coffee stain at the corner that looked like a state on a map. At the back of the file was a typed list someone had made for a walking tour years ago. There was a line that read, "Bench added in memory of M.E. Funds donated by I.H. 1923. Then, in pen, in a different hand, a scribble. "Don't print this," underlined twice. I stared at those words until the letters floated a little. My palms stung where I'd caught myself the day before. I had a little round bruise on the heel of my hand that didn't make sense. I put my hand on the desk and traced the circle with my thumb. On my way home, the wind rose up and moved through the aspen and made them all shake at once. The leaves were that last yellow they get before they go dull. They scraped across the pavement in gusts, little quick sounds, like low voices. The motion light clicked on as I reached for the door. I wasn't even close enough for the sensor. That made something in my stomach drop in a way I can't explain. I went inside and set my bag down. The house smelled like cut flowers, not strong, just a little. Kelsey called from the hallway. "Claire?" Except she wasn't home. I knew it before I knew it. The hallway was empty. The light was on. The radiator knocked once, very hard, and then quieted. I stood very still in the kitchen until I could hear my own breath. Later, when I opened the mail on the little table, there was an envelope from our landlord. It had a copy of the history of the property he gives people to be cute, which I'd never fully read. There's a page with a blurry photo of the house when it was narrower. There's a list of owners, mostly names I didn't know. And in the middle of that list, Hart, I, Isabel, 1902-1926. I'd seen it in the file at the museum, but seeing it in my house, in that cheap photocopy on our little table where we put our keys, felt different. It put it inside, if that makes sense. I looked at it until the letters stopped making sense. Kelsey came in while I was still looking and put the groceries down and said, "What's that?" And I said, "It's nothing," and slid it under the stack. That night at 3, I woke up because I knew I should wake up. The house was holding itself still in that way it does when it almost forgets you're inside. The motion light clicked on. The screen door creaked. The insects were quiet. I heard the gravel shift just once. Then I heard a soft voice from the back hallway say, not my name, not Kelsey's, but Maria, like a practice. Like you say it the way you'd say it to yourself before you open your mouth. I sat up. I stared at the doorway. The hall light was on again. I got up and stood in the hallway and listened until my legs shook from standing. Something cold moved past me. Not hard, not like a draft, like when someone walks by and brushes your sleeve with theirs. I stood very still and said to no one, okay, which I know sounds crazy, but it felt like the thing you say when you don't know what else to say. In the morning, Kelsey had circles under her eyes. She said, I heard it too. We didn't specify what it was. We didn't need to. We didn't decide anything. But we started doing little things without calling them anything. Closing the doors, checking the locks twice. Putting the flowers any visitor brought inside a drawer, and then feeling silly and taking them back out. The Wednesday flowers kept appearing. Sometimes there was a damp ring on the bench. Sometimes the flowers were tucked low. Sometimes they were only petals, like someone had shaken the whole thing out and left the good pieces. At work, I typed the label for a photograph of the main street in 1880. In the background, way off, there's a strip of hillside where the cemetery would be. Except in the photo, there's a blank spot. No fence, no stones. That's reasonable. Photographs leave things out. The exposure was bad in that area. The trees looked like smudges. Still, it made the room feel tighter. Mr. Daly came by again to return a wrench he'd borrowed from our landlord. He stood at the edge of the porch and didn't come in. He said, "You ladies are doing fine," like we'd asked him. I asked him if he knew the Ellises. He scratched his head and said, "Everybody knows everybody if you go back far enough. But knowing and knowing," he kind of shrugged, like language wasn't going to pull him out of the hole he'd dug. "Everything out there is where it is," he said. "And everything in here," he gestured at the door, "is here." He kept his eyes on the split rail fence while he said it. I went back to the museum files that afternoon, even though I told myself I wouldn't. I pulled the folder with our address again. The thin map was there, the note. At the bottom of the stack, under the last page where I thought I'd reached the cardboard, there was a single index card I hadn't noticed before. It was handwritten in that neat small script the old volunteers use. It said, "Bench dedication program, missing. Photos promised, not received." Under that, written later in a different pen, a different hand, "Stop, see me, E.H." The letters were pressed hard, like whoever wrote them pressed the paper too hard. We never had an E.H. on staff. It's a little museum. I know the names. I turned the card over. On the back, there was nothing. I sat there a long time, bouncing my heel against the lower drawer so the sound clocked against the wood. That knocking made me think of the radiator at home. I thought of the bench, of the initials, of the grave under the spruce. I thought of Kelsey hearing her name, and me hearing mine, and then hearing Maria. I thought about my habit of leaving the back door on the chain, because I like fresh air more than is sensible at night. I thought about how whoever left those flowers did it whether we were watching or not, whether there were words for it or not. On my way home, late, the wind had died. It was that weird quiet you get before snow that doesn't come. The leaves had piled up against the base of the split rail fence. My feet crunched gravel. The motion light stayed steady. The house smelled like nothing. I put my bag down on the table. There was a single flower petal there. Yellow. It stuck to my finger when I tried to lift it. I don't have a way to explain that. I don't even know if it needs explaining. I walked to the back hallway. The light was on. As I reached up to switch it off, I saw that the chain on the back door was undone. I hadn't touched it. The night air leaned in around the door, cool and thin. I could hear the creak like it was inside the walls. Kelsey's door was closed. The wood under my feet made a small noise, like a breath. On the kitchen table, under the landlord's property history, the name I'd seen before looked like it was looking back at me. Isabel Hart. I set my hand on the paper. I could feel the table under it, the nick in the wood where someone had set a hot pot once and left a ring. The church bell rang once for 9. It sounded lower than usual, like the air had thickened. The insects outside were quiet. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked and then stopped. I waited. I thought about returning the landlord's packet. I thought about pulling the chain across the door again. Instead, I stood there with my hand on the paper and listened to the house, to the way it held itself, like it was waiting for something small and certain. I don't have a good way to finish this, because nothing finished. It just kept going the way these things do. We started noticing the same things on the same nights. The flowers on Wednesdays, the damp rings, the light clicking on when no one was there, the names showing up in places we didn't expect them. I tried to make a list that made a pattern, but all the pattern did was circle the same handful of details, like they'd been circling us already. I don't know what the graves are or aren't. I know what a bench looks like when it's turned a little less than you'd expect. I know how a door sounds when it opens a piece, and how a voice can flatten and come from somewhere it shouldn't. I know how splintered rails feel under your hands, and how quickly the world can go quiet. I know the way a name looks different on a page when you see it in your own kitchen. The fence was never meant to keep anyone out. My name is Curtis, and I'm from Galena, Illinois. I moved back here about 2 years ago. Got a job as a claims examiner for one of the insurance offices downtown. It's not exciting work, but it's steady. You know, you look at forms all day, check the dates, make sure the signatures line up. My brother Jared came with me. He's younger, got a job at the sporting goods store on Main Street. We rent this old 2-story place on Prospect Street, right at the edge of town. It's one of those narrow houses they built for the lead miners back in the day. Anyway, it's cheap, and the landlord doesn't ask questions. Jared and I get along okay. We share the groceries, split the utilities. He's messy, I'm not. That's about the worst of it. He gives me a hard time about my schedule sometimes. I'm up at 5:30, out the door by 6:15. He's more of a night person, plays video games until 2 in the morning. The walls are thin enough that I can hear the gunfire sounds through my bedroom door, but I've got earplugs. It's fine. The thing about the house is, it's right across the street from a cemetery. Cedar Hill, it's called. Compact little place, maybe 100 graves total. 1870s, the sign says. It's well kept, but old, you know? The grass gets mowed, but the stones are all weathered. There's a low stone wall around the perimeter, and an iron gate that squeaks when the wind catches it, which is often. This is Illinois, windy. At first, Jared made all the usual jokes. Neighbors are quiet, stuff like that. He'd wave at the gravestones when we pulled into the driveway. Real mature. But after a while, you just stop noticing. It's just part of the view, like having a park across the street. In the summer, I'd sit on the front porch with my coffee and watch the sun come up behind the headstones. The light hits them a certain way. It's peaceful, honestly. Galena's that kind of town. Quiet. Tourists come through for the historic district, but where we live, it's just locals. Everything closes early. You get used to the sounds. The train horn at night, way off across the river. The church bells from St. Michael's on the hour. Crows in the morning. Sometimes you hear the high school band practicing if the wind's right. That's about it. Jared started mentioning things after we'd been there about 6 months. Little stuff. "Hey, did you leave the gate open?" he asked one morning. I hadn't. It was swung wide, which was weird because I knew I'd heard it latch the night before. But I mean, it could have been the wind. That gate's got a faulty catch. I've been meaning to fix it. Then he asked about the flowers. Who's putting fresh flowers on graves that old? I looked. There were these yellow mums on a pair of matching headstones near the center. The stones were for a husband and wife, died 2 days apart in 1884. The lichen had grown so thick you could barely read the names anymore. Just the dates. The flowers looked like they'd been placed there that morning. I figured it was maybe a historical society thing, or descendants visiting. Galena families go way back. The motion light on our garage started acting up too. It would click on at like 3 in the morning, lighting up the driveway and spilling over into the cemetery. I'd look out my bedroom window and see the glow across the street, catching the edges of the stones. Never saw anything moving. Probably just raccoons. We get a lot of raccoons. Jared said he saw a cat once, but it was just a shadow. One night in October, I was up late finishing some paperwork. The radiator in my room was knocking like it does. The house was settling. You know how old houses are. They talk to you. I heard this sound, like a voice, but not quite. More like the wind had learned to shape words. I got up and looked out. The cemetery was dark. The street light at the corner had gone out, which happened sometimes. The voice, if that's what it was, stopped. I told myself it was just leaves scraping the pavement. We have a lot of trees. Jared started getting weird about it, though. He'd come home from work and stand in the front yard, just staring. "You ever notice those 2 graves?" he asked me. "The matching ones?" "They're always together. I mean, always. The flowers on one, the flowers on the other. Same type, same freshness." I said, yeah, I'd noticed. He looked at me like I was supposed to have more of an answer. "That's kind of weird, right?" I shrugged. Maybe it's the same person visiting both. Their great-great-grandparents or something. He didn't look convinced. The clerk at the Historical Society downtown, Mrs. Chen, she knows everything about this town. I ran into her at the post office and asked, just casual, about Cedar Hill, who maintains it, that kind of thing. She got this look. "Oh, that's a lovely old cemetery," she said. But she said it fast, like she wanted to end the conversation. I mentioned the matching graves, the flowers. She just nodded. "Some plots have perpetual care agreements," she said. "From families." Then she changed the subject, asked about my work. That was it. But I started paying more attention. Every 3rd morning, like clockwork, the mums would be fresh. Not just fresh, perfect. Like they'd never been touched by wind or frost. And it was only on those 2 graves. The rest of the cemetery was just normal. Grass growing, leaves collecting, lichen spreading. But those 2 stones, they looked almost cared for. The marble was cleaner. The garage light kept triggering. Always around 3:15. I started waking up before it happened, like my body knew. I'd lie there in the dark, listening to Jared's games downstairs, waiting for that click. When it came, I'd get up, look out, and there was never anything. Except one time, I saw the gate. It was open again. And I could have sworn I saw something near those matching graves. Not a person, more like a ripple in the air, like heat coming off summer pavement, but it was 40 degrees out. I blinked and it was gone. I told myself it was sleep deprivation. Work had been heavy, lots of claims after that hailstorm. I was putting in overtime. Then the footsteps started. Not in the cemetery, in our house. I'd be in the kitchen, making coffee at my usual time, and I'd hear someone walking upstairs. Slow, deliberate steps. I'd stop what I was doing and listen. The sound would stop too. I'd think, okay, Jared's up early. But when I'd go check, his door would be closed and I'd hear him snoring. That heavy, congested snore he does. One morning, I found mud on the stairs. Just a few spots, like someone had tracked it in. But it hadn't rained. The ground was frozen solid. I cleaned it up without saying anything to Jared. Didn't want him making a big deal out of it. He noticed things anyway. "Did you move my keys?" he asked. They were on the kitchen table. He said he'd left them by the front door. I hadn't touched them. "Maybe you forgot," I said. He just looked at me. "I always put them by the door." He was right. He does. It's one of his things. The whispers started after that. always when I was alone. I'd be in the living room, reading, and I'd hear someone say something from the hallway. Not words I could make out, more like the shape of a name. I'd get up, look. Nothing. The house would be quiet, except for the radiator. I started avoiding the front porch in the mornings. Started drinking my coffee in the kitchen instead, where I couldn't see the cemetery. Jared noticed. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Just cold out." It wasn't that cold. I did some digging. I know I shouldn't have, but I went to the county records office on my lunch break, looked up Cedar Hill. Those matching graves belonged to Thomas and Margaret Halloway. Died November 12th and 14th, 1884. The cause of death wasn't listed, but there was a note. Perpetual care arrangement, private. That was it. I asked the guy at the records office, just casual, who would have that arrangement. He didn't know, said the records from that period were spotty. A lot of them were lost in the courthouse fire of 32. He seemed happy to leave it at that. Back at the house, I started noticing the temperature drops, specific spots. The hallway upstairs near my bedroom door. It would be freezing there, but warm everywhere else. Our heating system is old, but it's not that old. I'd walk through and feel it, like walking through a cold draft, but all the windows were closed. Jared felt it too. "We should call someone," he said. I said, "Yeah, I didn't call anyone." The whispers got clearer, not by much, just enough. It sounded like Thomas, always that name. Thomas, always from the direction of the cemetery, even when I was inside. I'd be doing dishes and I'd hear it, and I'd look out the kitchen window, across the street, at those matching stones, and I'd think, this is how people go crazy. This is exactly how it happens. Little by little, doubting yourself. I found footprints again, this time in the hallway, right where it's coldest. Just one set, leading from the front door to the stairs. Small, like a woman's shoe. They were wet, okay, like they'd been made in dew, but it was 7 at night. Jared saw them too. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me, and I could see he was scared. I wanted to tell him it was nothing. Couldn't get the words out. Our neighbor, Mrs. Gable, she's lived in her house for 40 years. I caught her getting her mail and asked straight out about the Halloways. She stopped, just froze with her mail in her hand. "Why are you asking about them?" she said. I told her I lived across from their graves. She looked at the cemetery, then at our house. "You shouldn't have moved into that place," she said. "That arrangement, it's not what you think." I asked what she meant. She just shook her head. "They wanted to stay together," she said. "That's all I'll say." She went inside. Her porch light was off by 6 that night. It's usually on until 10. I looked up the Halloways in the old census records. Found them. Thomas and Margaret lived at 417 Prospect Street. That's our address. They lived in our house. Died in our house, I guess. 2 days apart. The mums keep coming. Every third morning. I watched once from my window at 3:15. The garage light clicked on. I saw the gate swing open. I saw someone, something, walk through. Not like a person. Like a shape the light couldn't quite hold on to. It went to the graves. It knelt. When it stood up, the flowers were there, fresh. Then it walked back toward the gate. But it didn't go through. It turned. It looked at the house, at my window. I dropped the curtain. I didn't look again. Jared's talking about moving out. Says he can get a place with some guys from work. I told him that's probably a good idea. He asked if I'm coming with him. I said I don't know. I honestly don't know. The whispers aren't just whispers anymore. Sometimes it's a voice, clear, calling from the hallway. "Thomas." I don't answer. I don't go look. I just stay in my room with the door locked and the radiator knocking, knocking, knocking. I found a photograph in the basement last week, tucked behind a beam. It's old, cracked. Shows a man and a woman in front of this house. They're holding hands. She's wearing a dress with a high collar. He's in a suit that doesn't fit quite right. On the back, in pencil, Thomas and Margaret Halloway. 1884. Home at last. The footprints keep appearing, always wet, always leading from the door to the stairs. Sometimes I hear someone walking up them, slow, like they're carrying something heavy, or like they're tired. I called a locksmith, had him change the front door lock. He asked why I wanted a deadbolt that locks from the outside. I said I didn't know what he meant. He showed me. The lock I'd asked for, it only works if you're trying to keep someone in, not out. I told him to put it on anyway. The garage light doesn't trigger anymore. I disconnected it, but I still wake up at 3:15 every night, and I hear the gate. I hear it open. I stopped asking whose name that is. My name is Garrett, and I'm from Lanesboro, Minnesota. I don't know exactly when things started to feel wrong. That's the thing about slow changes. You don't notice them until you're already deep in them. Like how you don't notice the days getting shorter until suddenly it's dark at 5 o'clock and you're wondering where the summer went. That's how this has been. A slow darkening, a gradual shift in the light. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning, or at least what I thought was the beginning. I moved to Lanesboro 3 years ago this past April. I came for a job, grant writer for the Regional Arts Council. It's the kind of work that sounds more impressive than it is. Mostly I sit at a computer and write proposals, trying to convince foundations to give money to small-town theater programs and community murals. It's quiet work, steady, the kind of job where you can go weeks without any real excitement, and that suited me fine. Lanesboro itself is a small town, maybe 1,000 people, tucked into the bluffs along the Root River. It's beautiful in a postcard kind of way. Old limestone buildings, a main street with antique shops, and a little bookstore, hiking trails that wind through the hills. In summer, tourists come for the bike trail that runs through town. In winter, it gets quiet. Real quiet. The kind of quiet where you can hear your own heartbeat if you sit still long enough. I rented a house on the edge of town, up on a hill where the road curves toward the bluffs. It's an old place, built in the 1920s, with a wraparound porch and windows that rattle when the wind picks up. The landlord, a retired professor who lives in Rochester now, warned me about the drafts and the creaky floors. He didn't warn me about the view. The cemetery is directly across the road. I know how that sounds. But when you're looking for affordable rent in a small town, you take what you can get. And honestly, when I first saw it, I didn't mind. The cemetery is modest, maybe 60 or 70 graves spread over a gentle slope. There's a fieldstone wall around it, low enough that you can see over it from the road. Near the entrance, someone keeps it tidy. The grass is mowed, the path is clear. There's even a little wooden bench by the gate where you can sit and look out over the valley. But beyond the first few rows, it gets wilder. The stones back there are older, leaning at odd angles, half swallowed by tall grass and creeping vines. Some of them have dates from the 1870s, carved in a style I don't recognize. Ornate, almost decorative, with symbols I had to look up later. Clasped hands, willow branches, lambs for the children's graves. There are a lot of children's graves. That was the first thing I noticed, actually. Walking through there one afternoon, just curious, I counted. Almost a third of the stones in the old section were for children under 10. Diphtheria, I figured. Scarlet fever. The things that used to take kids before vaccines. It made sense. It was sad, but it made sense. The cemetery didn't bother me. Not at first. My cousin Derek moved in about 6 months after I got settled. He'd taken a job at the hospital in Rochester, something in IT, network security, I think. And the commute from Lanesboro was easier than finding an apartment in the city. Plus, he said, he wanted to save money. I understood that. We'd always gotten along, even as kids. He's a few years younger than me, early 30s, the kind of guy who makes friends easily and doesn't take things too seriously. He made jokes about the cemetery from the first day. Nice neighbors, he said, hauling a box of clothes up the porch steps. Bet they're quiet. They don't complain about noise, I said. Perfect. I can finally practice my drums. He didn't actually have drums. That was just Derek, always joking. It was good to have him around. The house felt less empty with another person in it, less like I was rattling around alone in all that space. We settled into a routine. I worked from home most days, typing up proposals at the kitchen table while the coffee pot gurgled and the morning light came through the east windows. Derek left early for Rochester, came back around 6, and we'd cook dinner together or order pizza from the place on Main Street. Weekends, we'd hike the trails or drive to Rochester for groceries. Sometimes we'd sit on the porch in the evening, watching the sun go down behind the bluffs, the cemetery peaceful and still across the road. It was a good life. Simple. The kind of life I'd been looking for without knowing it. I want you to understand that. I want you to understand how normal it was, how calm, before things started to change. Because that's the part that still gets me. The before. How ordinary everything felt. How safe. The first thing I noticed, really noticed, was the gap. I'd walked through the cemetery a few times by then, mostly just to stretch my legs when I'd been sitting too long. The old section in the back had a kind of melancholy beauty to it, the way abandoned places sometimes do. I liked reading the names on the stones, imagining the lives behind them. Anna Larson, 1842-1878. Ole Gunderson, 1836 to 1871. Infant daughter, 1869. But one afternoon in October, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. There was a gap in the rows, not a big one, just a space, maybe 6 feet by 3, where the grass grew a little different, darker somehow, and thicker. But there was no stone, no marker, just empty ground between 2 other graves. I stood there for a while, looking at it. It was probably nothing. Probably someone had planned to be buried there and then moved away, or died somewhere else, or the family couldn't afford a stone. That happened, I knew. Not everyone got a marker, but the grass bothered me. It was October. The rest of the cemetery was fading into autumn browns and yellows, but the grass in that gap was green, deep green, like it was summer there and nowhere else. I mentioned it to Derek that night, casually over dinner. There's a weird spot in the cemetery, I said. Empty space where a grave should be, but the grass is different. He shrugged. Maybe they planted something there, fertilizer or whatever. Who would fertilize an empty grave? I don't know, man. Cemetery people. Maybe they're planning to use it. That made sense. I let it go, but I kept thinking about it. And the next time I walked through, I looked again. The grass was still green. The gate started opening in November. It's an old wooden gate, painted white about a decade ago from the looks of it, now chipped and peeling. There's a simple latch. You lift it, swing the gate open, and it clicks shut behind you. Nothing complicated, but I started finding it open in the mornings. Not wide open, just unlatched, pushed in a few inches, like someone had gone through and not bothered to close it properly. I figured it was deer. We had a lot of deer in the area, and I'd seen them in the cemetery before, grazing between the stones in the early morning mist. Maybe they'd figured out how to nose the latch open. I mentioned it to the woman at the hardware store when I went in for something else. Deer getting into the cemetery, I said. Gate keeps coming open. She gave me a look I couldn't quite read. That gate's been there since my grandmother's time, she said. Never had trouble with deer before. Maybe it's worn out. Latch is loose. Maybe. She didn't say anything else. But when I was leaving, she said, "That cemetery's older than it looks, you know, older than the stones." I didn't know what she meant by that. I thought about asking, but she'd already turned away to help another customer. I went home, didn't think about it much. But the gate kept opening. Every few days, sometimes 2 nights in a row, always unlatched, always pushed in just a few inches. I started closing it myself, making sure the latch caught, testing it with my hand. It kept happening. December came, and with it the cold. Minnesota cold is different from other places. It's not just temperature, it's presence. The cold here feels alive. It pushes against the windows. It finds the cracks in your walls. It settles into your bones and doesn't leave until April. The house had always been drafty, but that December, something changed. There was a spot by the back door, the one that faced the cemetery, where the cold was worse. Much worse. I'd stand there to grab my coat from the hook, and it felt like stepping into a freezer. The rest of the kitchen could be warm, the furnace running, the coffee steaming on the counter, but that corner was always cold. I checked the door, checked the seals, ran my hand along the frame, feeling for drafts. Nothing. The cold wasn't coming from outside. It was just there. Derek noticed it too, though he didn't say much at first. I'd see him avoiding that corner, walking the long way around the kitchen to get to the fridge. When I finally asked him about it, he just shrugged. "Old house," he said. "Cold spots happen." This didn't happen before. Maybe you just didn't notice. Maybe. But I didn't think so. The footsteps started in January. I was in bed, half asleep, when I heard them. Slow and deliberate, like someone walking carefully, trying not to make noise. They seemed to come from downstairs, from the kitchen, from that corner by the back door. I lay there, listening. The house was quiet otherwise. Derek's room was on the other side of the hall, and I couldn't hear anything from there. Just the footsteps. Step, 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 then nothing. I told myself it was the house settling. Old houses do that. The wood contracts in the cold, makes noises. That's all it was. But the next night, I heard them again. Same time, around 3 a.m, that dead hour when everything feels thin and far away. Same rhythm, same slow, careful steps. I got up that time, went to the top of the stairs, listened. The footsteps stopped. I waited, heart pounding, but there was nothing. Just silence. Just the dark. I went back to bed. In the morning, I found muddy footprints on the kitchen floor. Not mine. Not Derek's. The print was smaller, narrower, and the mud was dark, almost black, with a smell I couldn't place. Organic, sweet, like something decomposing. I cleaned it up before Derek woke up. I don't know why. I just didn't want to explain it. But 2 days later, the prints were back. Same spot, same size, same mud. This time, Derek saw them. "What the hell?" he said, standing in the kitchen doorway. "I don't know." "That's not Garrett. The back door is locked. It's been locked all night." "I know." "Then how?" "I don't know." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he got a mop and started cleaning. Neither of us talked about it after that. But I started checking the locks every night. Twice, 3 times, making sure everything was secure. It didn't help. I went to the library in February. I told myself I was just curious, just wanted to know more about the history of the place. That's normal, right? When you live somewhere, you want to know its story. There was nothing strange about it. The library in Lanesboro is small. Just 2 rooms in an old brick building on Main Street. The librarian, a woman named Marge, who'd lived in town her whole life, helped me find what I was looking for. "Cemetery records," she said. "We've got some. Not complete, but some." She brought me a box of folders, yellowed and dusty, smelling of old paper and something faintly sweet that I couldn't identify. I sat at a table by the window and started going through them. Most of it was what you'd expect. Burial records, plot maps, maintenance logs from the 1950s. But at the bottom of the box, I found a folder that was different. It was thinner than the others, held together with a rubber band that crumbled when I touched it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten, dated 1892. Regarding the matter of Plot 17, it said, The board has decided that no further burials shall take place in the northeast section until the matter is resolved. The Reverend has been consulted. All records pertaining to the original occupant have been sealed by order of the Church Council. The grave shall remain unmarked. May God have mercy. I read it 3 times. Then I went back to Marge. What's plot 17? I asked. She looked at the paper for a long moment. Her face didn't change, but something in her eyes did. Where did you find this? In the box, the cemetery records. That wasn't supposed to be in there. What's plot 17? She didn't answer. She took the paper from my hand, gently but firmly, and slid it into her desk drawer. Some things are better left alone, she said. You understand? No, I don't understand. What happened in the northeast section? What was the matter that needed to be resolved? She looked at me, and for just a moment, I saw something in her face that might have been fear. Go home, she said. Forget you saw that. I didn't forget. I started researching on my own, online records, genealogy sites, old newspaper archives. It wasn't easy. Lanesboro is small, and most of its history isn't digitized. But I found fragments, pieces. In 1871, there was a diphtheria outbreak in the area. Dozens of people died, mostly children. The cemetery filled up fast. New sections had to be opened. In 1889, there was a fire at the church. Most of the early records were destroyed. In 1892, the same year as the document I'd found, there was a brief mention in a Rochester newspaper about disturbances in a Lanesboro cemetery. The article was vague, referencing only concerns from local residents and matters being addressed by church authorities. No details, no explanation. But there was one more thing. In the 1890 census, I found a name. A woman named Eliza Howell, age 34. Occupation listed as domestic. She lived in a house on the edge of town, on a hill overlooking the valley. My house. She wasn't in the 1900 census, or any census after that. She had simply vanished. I looked for a death record. There wasn't one. I looked for a grave. There wasn't one. Not officially, anyway. The flowers started appearing in March. I noticed them on the gap, that empty space in the cemetery where the grass grew too green. Fresh flowers, laid carefully on the ground, not in a vase, just placed there, stems tied with a bit of string. I didn't recognize the flowers at first. They were white, small, with a delicate shape I couldn't name. I took a photo and looked them up later. Lily of the Valley. I learned 2 things about Lily of the Valley. First, it means return to happiness, in the language of flowers. Second, it's poisonous, every part of it. I didn't know what to make of that, but the flowers kept appearing, every few days, always fresh, always in the same spot. One morning, I decided to wait. I got up early, before dawn, and sat by my bedroom window, watching the cemetery. The light was gray and thin, the kind of light that makes everything look like a photograph from another era. I watched for 2 hours. No one came. But when I went out to check later that morning, the flowers were there. Fresh, damp with dew, tied with string. Derek started sleeping badly in April. He didn't say anything at first, but I could see it, the shadows under his eyes, the way he moved a little slower in the mornings, the extra cups of coffee he poured before heading to Rochester. Finally, one night, I asked him, "You okay?" He was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. It took him a moment to respond. "Bad dreams," he said. "About what?" He shook his head. "I don't know. I can't remember. I just wake up, scared, like really scared. Heart pounding, can't breathe. And I don't know why." When did this start? He thought about it. A couple weeks ago, maybe. Right around when the weather started getting warmer. I didn't say anything, but I remembered. The flowers had started appearing around the same time. That night, I woke up at 3 again. But this time, it wasn't footsteps. It was a voice. Faint, distant. Like someone calling from very far away. I couldn't make out words, just the shape of them, the rise and fall of speech. I got out of bed, walked to the hallway. Derek's door was closed, and I couldn't hear anything from inside. The voice was coming from downstairs, from the kitchen, from the corner by the back door. I stood at the top of the stairs, my hand on the railing, and listened. The voice went on for maybe 30 seconds, then stopped. Just silence after that. Just the dark. I didn't go down. In the morning, there were fresh flowers on the kitchen table. White ones, small. Lily of the valley. I hadn't picked them. I hadn't brought them in. And when I checked the cemetery, the gap was empty. Someone had moved them. Someone had moved them from the unmarked grave to my kitchen. I started asking questions around town. The hardware store woman, the librarian, the guy who ran the antique shop on Main Street. Anyone who might know something. Most of them didn't want to talk. They'd change the subject, or suddenly remember something they had to do, or just give me a look that said, "Don't ask." But the antique shop owner, an old man named Harold, who'd lived in Lanesboro his whole life, finally told me something. "That house you're renting," he said. "It's got history." "What kind of history?" He was quiet for a moment, straightening a display of old photographs on the counter. "My grandmother used to talk about the woman who lived there. This was back before the First World War. Eliza, her name was, kept to herself. People said she was strange." "Strange how?" "She'd walk in the cemetery at night, sit by the graves and talk to them. People thought she was touched, you know? Not right in the head." "What happened to her?" He looked at me. "Nobody knows. One day she was there, next day she wasn't. House sat empty for years. Nobody wanted to buy it. But they did eventually. Yeah, eventually. Memory fades." He paused. "You heard anything at night, in that house?" I didn't answer. "Thought so." He went back to straightening his photographs. "Best not to listen too closely. If you know what I mean. Some things want to be heard. Doesn't mean you should hear them." May came. The weather warmed. The trees filled in with leaves, and the cemetery turned green and lush, alive with birdsong and the buzz of insects. But the gap stayed different. The grass there was darker now, thicker. It seemed to grow faster than the rest, like something beneath it was feeding it. And the shape of it had changed, or maybe I just noticed it for the first time. It wasn't quite rectangular anymore. It had a curve to it, a shape, like a body, lying on its side. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it. The mind sees patterns where there aren't any. It's a known thing. Pareidolia. You see faces in clouds, shapes in shadows. It doesn't mean anything. But every time I looked at that gap, the shape was clearer. Derek came to me one evening, pale and shaking. "Garrett," he said, "I need to tell you something." We sat on the porch. The sun was going down, painting the sky orange and pink. The cemetery was quiet across the road, the stones throwing long shadows. "I've been hearing something," he said, "at night, when I wake up from the dreams." "Footsteps?" "No." "A voice." I went cold. "What does it say?" He swallowed. "My name." I didn't say anything. "It knows my name, Garrett. It calls for me. And He stopped, took a breath. "I want to answer. I don't know why, but I want to go to it. I want to find out who's calling." "Where does it come from?" He pointed, at the cemetery, at the gap. I went to Rochester the next day, to the Historical Society. I needed to know more. The woman there was helpful, in a professional way. She found what records they had on Lanesboro, spread them out on a table for me to look through. Census records, church records, property transfers. I went through them all, looking for Eliza Howell, and I found her. Not in a death record, not in a grave listing. In a church disciplinary file, dated 1891. The matter of Eliza Howell, it said. Having been determined by the council that her practices are contrary to Scripture and Christian decency, she is hereby excommunicated from the fellowship of this congregation. She is forbidden from burial in consecrated ground. The nature of her transgressions is not to be spoken of or recorded. I read it again. Excommunicated, forbidden from burial in consecrated ground. But she was buried there, in the gap, in the unmarked space. I was sure of it now. Someone had buried her there anyway. And whatever she had done, it was so terrible that they wouldn't even write it down. I drove home in a daze. The sun was setting by the time I got there, and the house was dark. Derek's car wasn't in the driveway. I went inside, turned on the lights, tried to feel normal. The kitchen was cold, that corner by the back door, colder than ever. And on the table, there were flowers. Not lily of the valley this time. Roses. Red roses, fully bloomed, their petals already starting to fall. There was a note beneath them, not written, carved, into the wood of my kitchen table. Letters gouged deep, as if by a fingernail. Come home. I stood there, staring at it for a long time. Then I heard the footsteps. Not downstairs, not in the kitchen, behind me, in the hallway. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. The footsteps came closer, slow, deliberate. That same careful rhythm I'd heard so many nights. And then a voice, clear this time, close. A woman's voice, soft and sweet and utterly wrong. I've been waiting for you. I ran. I didn't go back to the house that night. I drove to Rochester, checked into a motel, and sat on the bed with the lights on until morning. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I called Derek. He didn't answer. I called again. Voicemail. I texted him. Call me. It's important. Nothing. By noon, I couldn't wait anymore. I drove back to Lanesboro. Derek's car was in the driveway. I went inside, calling his name. The house was quiet. The kitchen table still had the carving in it. I hadn't imagined that, but the flowers were gone. I went upstairs. His bedroom door was closed. I knocked. Derek? Nothing. I opened the door. The room was empty. The bed was made. Everything was neat and orderly. But on the pillow, there was a single flower, lily of the valley, and below it, another note. This one written in Derek's handwriting. She told me to come. I had to answer. I found him in the cemetery. He was standing in the gap, in that empty space where no stone stood. He was facing away from me, toward the old section, toward the leaning stones and the tangled grass. Derek. He didn't turn around. Derek, come back to the house, please. He didn't move. I walked closer. The air got colder with every step. That same dead cold from the corner of the kitchen, but stronger now. My breath misted in front of me, even though it was May, even though the sun was shining. Derek. I reached out to touch his shoulder, and he turned. His face was pale. His eyes were open, but they didn't seem to see me. They were looking past me, at something I couldn't see. She's beautiful, he whispered. Why didn't you tell me she was beautiful? Who? Derek, who are you talking about? He smiled. It was the saddest smile I'd ever seen. Eliza. I got him back to the house. He didn't fight me, didn't say anything else. Just let me lead him across the road and up the porch steps and into the living room. He sat on the couch and stared at nothing, that same empty look in his eyes. I made coffee. I didn't know what else to do. Derek, I said. What happened? What did you see? He looked at me, and for a moment, I thought I saw something of the old Derek, the cousin I'd grown up with, the guy who joked about everything, who never took things too seriously. She's been here the whole time, he said, in the gap. Waiting. She can't leave. They buried her outside the lines, Not in the consecrated ground, but next to it. Close enough to see it, close enough to want it, but you can't get in. What does she want? Company, he said. She's been alone so long. She just wants someone to stay with her. I felt the cold then, creeping in through the walls, through the floor, that dead, wrong cold that had been living in the corner of my kitchen. She's been visiting, Derek said, every night, bringing flowers, leaving them for you, trying to get your attention. But you wouldn't listen. You kept ignoring her. I didn't, so she started talking to me instead. I called a priest. I know how that sounds. I'm not particularly religious, but I didn't know what else to do. The Catholic Church in Rochester sent someone, a young guy, maybe 30, with a calm manner and a patient voice. He listened to everything I told him. He didn't interrupt. He didn't look at me like I was crazy. When I was finished, he was quiet for a long moment. The cemetery, he said finally. It's not fully consecrated, is it? I don't know. I don't know how that works. Old cemeteries, especially in rural areas, sometimes the boundaries weren't clearly defined. The church would consecrate a certain area, but if the cemetery expanded over time, the northeast section. He nodded. If someone was buried there, someone forbidden from consecrated ground, they might be in a kind of limbo, close enough to see where they can't go, close enough to suffer for it. What do I do? He thought about it. You could leave, move away. That would end your involvement. And what about her? What about Eliza? He looked at me with something like compassion. I don't know. I'm not sure anyone knows. The records were sealed for a reason. Whatever she did, whatever was done to her, it's been buried for over a century. Maybe it's better if it stays that way. But she's suffering. Maybe. Or maybe she's something else entirely. Something that wears suffering like a mask. He stood up. Be careful. Not everything that seems lost wants to be found. Derek left a week later. He didn't give me a reason. Didn't need to. We both knew. He packed his things quietly, loaded his car, and stood on the porch for a moment, looking at the cemetery. I can still hear her, he said, sometimes, at night, calling my name. I'm sorry, he shook his head. Don't be. You didn't do anything. He paused. But Garrett, don't stay. This place isn't right. There's something wrong with the ground here. Something wrong with the history. Get out while you can. He drove away. I watched his car until it disappeared around the curve. Then I went inside. I didn't leave. I don't know why. Part of me wanted to. Part of me knew I should. But something held me there. Curiosity, maybe. Or stubbornness. Or something else. Something I don't like to think about. I started spending more time in the cemetery. Not in the gap. I stayed away from that. But in the other sections, reading the stones, learning the names. Anna Larson, Ole Gunderson. The children's graves, so many of them, clustered together like they were keeping each other company. I found myself talking to them, not out loud, just in my head, telling them about my day, about the work I was doing, about the weather and the birds and the way the light looked on the bluffs in the evening. It felt normal. It felt right. Maybe that should have worried me. The dreams started in June. Not like Derek's dreams, not nightmares. Mine were quiet, peaceful even. I dreamed of a woman in a white dress, walking through the cemetery at night. Her face was always in shadow, but I knew she was beautiful. I could feel it somehow, a radiance coming off her, like warmth from a fire. She would walk among the graves, touching each stone gently, whispering names I couldn't quite hear. And then she would stop at the gap, that empty space where the grass grew too green, and she would kneel down, and she would weep. In the dreams, I wanted to go to her. I wanted to comfort her. I wanted to tell her she wasn't alone. But I always woke up before I could. July, the hottest month. The house was stifling, and I spent most of my time on the porch, watching the cemetery shimmer in the heat haze. One evening, just before sunset, I saw something. A A figure standing in the gap. Not Derek. Someone else. A woman. She was facing away from me, toward the old section. She wore a white dress, or something that looked like a white dress in the dying light. Her hair was dark and long, falling past her shoulders. I got up from my chair. I walked down the porch steps. I crossed the road. I opened the gate, and I walked toward her. The closer I got, the colder the air became. By the time I reached the edge of the gap, I could see my breath. My hands were numb. My heart was pounding. Eliza? She didn't turn around. I know what they did to you. I found the records, the excommunication, the burial outside the lines. Nothing. I'm sorry. What they did was wrong. You deserved better. And then, slowly, she turned. I saw her face for the first time. It was beautiful. Terribly, impossibly beautiful. But there was something wrong with it. Something I couldn't quite identify. The proportions were off somehow. The eyes too large, the smile too wide. And she was smiling. You came, she said. I knew you would. They always come eventually. What do you mean? The ones who live in my house, the ones who see the gap, they always come. I tried to step back. I couldn't move. What happened to you, Eliza? What did you do? The smile faded. I loved them, she said. The children. All those sick children, dying of fever and fear. I loved them so much. I only wanted to keep them with me. I only wanted them to stay. What do you mean, keep them? The lily of the valley, she said. It's so sweet, so gentle. They never felt any pain. I understood then. The children's graves, so many of them, all from that same period, the 1880s and 1890s. You killed them. I saved them, she said, from suffering, from the world. They're with me now. They've always been with me. And soon, you'll be with me too. I ran. I don't remember getting back to the house. I don't remember locking the door, or turning on the lights, or sitting down in the living room with my back against the wall. But I remember what happened next. The footsteps. Not from outside this time. Not from the kitchen. From upstairs. Slow, deliberate. That same careful rhythm. And voices. Not one voice. Many voices. Small, high voices. Children's voices. Singing. All around the mulberry bush. The monkey chased the weasel. The monkey thought 'twas all in fun. Pop goes the weasel closer, coming down the stairs. A penny for a spool of thread, a penny for a needle. That's the way the money goes. Pop goes the weasel. I closed my eyes. The singing stopped. When I opened them, there was a child standing in the doorway. A little girl, maybe 7 years old. She wore a white nightgown, and her face was pale, so pale. Come with us, she said. It's nice where we are. She takes care of us. She loves us. No, you're already one of us. You just don't know it yet. What do you mean? She smiled, the same wrong smile I'd seen on Eliza's face. The flowers, she said. She's been giving you the flowers every day, in your water, in your food. You've been drinking them for months. I thought of the flowers on the kitchen table, the way they kept appearing and disappearing, the way the water from the tap sometimes tasted faintly sweet. It takes a while, the little girl said, but it's already in you. It's already working. Soon you'll be sleepy, and then you'll be with us forever. I left that night. I drove to Rochester, checked into the hospital, told them I thought I'd been poisoned. They ran tests, found traces of cardiac glycosides in my system. The doctors were baffled. They couldn't figure out where I'd been exposed. I didn't try to explain. I stayed in Rochester for a week until the tests came back clean. I never went back to the house. I had someone else pack my things, ship them to my new address. I didn't look at the cemetery again. I didn't want to know if she was watching. That was 6 months ago. I live in Milwaukee now. Different state, different life. I work at a museum, cataloging donations. It's quiet work, safe. But sometimes, at night, I still hear the footsteps, and sometimes I find flowers on my doorstep. White ones, small, tied with string. I don't know how she's finding me. I don't know if it's really her, or if it's something I'm doing without knowing it. Maybe the poison did something to my mind. Maybe I'm seeing things that aren't there. But the flowers are real. I've touched them. I've smelled them. Lily of the valley, sweet and poisonous. I threw them away the first time, and the second time, and the third. But they keep coming back. And last week, I woke up at 3 a.m. and found myself standing at my front door, hand on the knob, about to open it. I don't remember getting out of bed. I don't remember walking downstairs, but I remember what I heard just before I woke up. A voice, her voice, soft and sweet, and calling my name. "Come home," she said. "I'm still waiting. I'll always be waiting." I've thought about going back more than once. Part of me wants to. Part of me thinks maybe she's right. Maybe I do belong there. Maybe I always did. But I haven't gone. Not yet. Every morning I check the doorstep. Every morning there are more flowers. And every night the voice gets a little closer. I went to a church last Sunday. First time in years. I don't know what I was looking for. Absolution, maybe. Or protection. Something to make it stop. The priest listened to my confession. I told him everything. When I was done, he was quiet for a long time. "Some souls," he said finally, "don't want to be saved. They want company in their damnation." "What do I do?" "Pray," he said, "and don't answer when she calls." I'm trying, but it's getting harder. Last night, I found something in my jacket pocket. I don't know how it got there. I hadn't worn that jacket in weeks. It had been hanging in my closet, untouched since I moved. It was a photograph, old, black and white, creased and faded. A woman in a white dress, standing in a cemetery. The stones behind her were crooked and old. The grass at her feet was dark and thick. And she was looking directly at the camera, directly at me. On the back, in handwriting I didn't recognize, someone had written, "Almost home." I burned the photograph, but this morning it was back, on my pillow, unburned. The same photograph, the same woman, the same words on the back. I don't know how much longer I can keep running. I don't know if running even matters. Maybe Derek was right. Maybe once she sees you, once she knows your name, it's already too late. Maybe I was hers from the moment I moved into that house, from the moment I first looked at the gap and wondered who was buried there. The flowers come every day now, sometimes twice a day. And the voice is inside my head now, not outside. Inside. "Come home," she says. I'm lonely. I've been lonely for so long. I try not to listen, but she's so sad. And part of me, the part that walked toward her that night in the cemetery, the part that wanted to comfort her, that part wants to go. That part thinks maybe it wouldn't be so bad. Maybe she really does love us. Maybe the children are happy there, in the gap, in the dark. Maybe I would be happy too. I'm writing this down because I need someone to know. I need there to be a record, in case I disappear like Eliza did, like the children did, like maybe Derek will someday. If you ever find yourself in Lanesboro, don't rent the house on the hill. Don't walk in the cemetery. Don't look at the gap where the grass grows too green. And if you see a woman in white standing among the stones, don't go to her. Don't answer when she calls your name, because she will call you. She calls everyone eventually. It's 3 a.m. now. I hear the footsteps, not outside, not downstairs, here, in my room, standing behind me. I can feel the cold on my neck, that same dead cold from the corner of my kitchen, all those months ago. I'm not going to turn around. I'm not going to look. I'm going to keep typing these words, keep telling this story until Garrett, her voice, right in my ear. It's time to come home. This manuscript was found on a laptop in an apartment in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The apartment was vacant. The tenant's belongings were undisturbed, but he was never found. On the kitchen table, there was a single flower, white and small, tied with string. The laptop was still open, still running. The cursor was still blinking. Editor's note: I debated whether to include the following. It was found in the tenant's browser history, dated 3 days after the manuscript ended. I don't know who typed it, but it was typed on the same laptop, in the same apartment. I've included it here because it feels important. Because it feels like an ending, or maybe a beginning. She is beautiful, she is kind. The children are happy here, in the gap. We sing songs and play games, and she tells us stories about the world above. We are not lonely anymore. We are not afraid. There is room for more. There is always room for more. If you hear her calling, if you see the flowers, if you feel the cold, don't run. Come home. We're waiting for you. My name is Marcus, and I'm from St. Genevieve, Missouri. I should clarify that. I wasn't born here. I grew up in Kansas City, lived there until I was 22, then joined the Army and spent the next 8 years moving around more than I ever thought I would. Fort Bragg, Fort Hood, a deployment to Afghanistan, another to Kuwait. By the time I got out, I didn't really have a place that felt like home anymore. My parents had moved to Florida. My sister was in Seattle. Kansas City was just a city I used to know. So when I got a job offer in St. Genevieve, I took it. Title examiner for a small law firm that handles property transactions, estate settlements, that kind of thing. It's quiet work, methodical. You spend most of your time reading old deeds, tracing ownership chains, making sure everything lines up before someone buys or sells a piece of land. I like it. After the Army, I wanted something predictable, something where the biggest problem I'd face was a missing signature from 1952. St. Genevieve is one of the oldest towns in Missouri, French colonial, founded in the 1700s. A lot of the buildings downtown still have that old French architecture, the vertical log construction, the wide porches. There's a historical district with brick streets and antique shops and a bakery that makes something called a French tart. That's basically just a sugar cookie the size of your hand. Tourists come through in the summer, but mostly it's just locals. Quiet. The kind of place where people wave at you even if they don't know you. I've been here about 3 years now, renting a house on the south side of town, past the main drag, where the streets get narrower and the lots get bigger. It's a good house, built in the 1920s, I think, though parts of it might be older. 2 stories, white clapboard siding, a deep front porch with a swing that came with the place. The floors creak in certain spots, and the windows stick in the summer when it gets humid, but it's solid, comfortable. My Army buddy Derek moved in with me about 1.5 years ago. We served together in Afghanistan, same unit, and he's one of those guys you just stay in touch with. After he got out, he bounced around for a while, had some trouble adjusting, went through a rough patch. When I mentioned I had an extra room and cheap rent, he drove down from St. Louis the next weekend with everything he owned in the back of his truck. It's been good having him here. Derek works at an auto shop on the edge of town, does mechanic work during the day, and keeps to himself at night. He's not much of a talker, but we understand each other. Sometimes we'll sit on the porch after dinner and drink a beer and not say anything for an hour. It's not awkward. It's just how we are. The thing about the house, the thing that makes it a little unusual, is what's next to it. There's a cemetery, right there, maybe 30 feet from the side of the house, separated by a low fieldstone wall that's been there longer than anything else on the property. The cemetery is old, really old, one of the original burial grounds from when the town was first settled. Compact, maybe 70 or 80 graves, most of them from the 1700s and 1800s. French names, mostly. Beauvais, Bolduc, Valais. Some of the stones are so weathered you can barely read them anymore. The inscriptions worn smooth by 200 years of rain and wind. The town maintains it, sort of. Someone comes by every few weeks to mow the grass and trim back the weeds. But it's got that look of age that no amount of maintenance can really hide. The stones are tilted at odd angles, sunk into the earth in places, like the ground is slowly pulling them down. There are a few above-ground tombs near the back, limestone vaults with iron doors rusted shut. And there's one grave, set apart from the others near the far corner, that always catches my eye. Bigger stone, darker granite, with a carved angel on top that's missing one wing. When I first moved in, the cemetery bothered me a little. Not in a superstitious way, just in a practical sense. It seemed strange to live so close to the dead, but after a while, I got used to it. It's just part of the landscape now. I see it every morning when I walk to my car. I see it every evening when I sit on the porch. It's quiet, peaceful, shaded by old oak trees that have been there as long as the graves. Birds nest in the branches. Squirrels run along the top of the fieldstone wall. Derek made jokes about it when he first moved in, called the place the Boneyard, and asked if I'd gotten a discount on rent. I told him the rent was normal, and he shrugged and said he didn't mind. After everything we'd seen overseas, a bunch of old graves wasn't going to keep him up at night. That's what we both thought anyway. The first thing I noticed, and I want to be clear that I didn't think anything of it at the time, was the light. It was maybe 4 months ago, early October. I'd stayed up late reading, something I do when I can't sleep, which is more often than I'd like. Around 2 a.m, I got up to get a glass of water, and as I passed the window in the upstairs hallway, I saw something in the cemetery. A light, faint, flickering, like a candle. It was near the back, close to where the above-ground tombs are. Just a small glow in the darkness, barely visible through the trees. I stood there for a minute, watching. The light didn't move. It just flickered, steady, like someone had lit a candle and left it there. I figured it was probably kids, teenagers maybe, sneaking into the cemetery at night to drink or smoke, or do whatever teenagers do. It happens in small towns, not much else to do. I thought about going out there, but it was cold and I was tired, so I just went back to bed. By the time I woke up the next morning, I'd mostly forgotten about it. But then I saw it again. A few nights later, same time, same place. That faint flickering glow near the back of the cemetery. I watched it for maybe 10 minutes, waiting for it to move or go out, but it just kept flickering. Steady, patient. I mentioned it to Derek over breakfast. He said he hadn't seen anything, but he also sleeps like the dead, so that wasn't surprising. He suggested it might be a reflection, maybe headlights from a car, on the road catching the limestone of the tombs at a certain angle. Light does weird things at night, he said. Remember that convoy outside Kandahar? Swore I saw lights on that hill for 3 nights straight. Turned out to be nothing. I remembered. He was right. Light does weird things, so I let it go. But I kept seeing it. Not every night, but often enough. Once or twice a week, always around the same time, always in the same spot. After a while, I started checking for it before I went to bed. I'd glance out the hallway window just to see, and more often than not, the light was there. I never saw anyone with it, never heard voices or footsteps, just that faint, flickering glow, like a candle burning in the dark. The second thing was the gate. The cemetery has an entrance on the far side, facing away from my house, with a simple iron gate set into the fieldstone wall. It's old, rusted in places, and it squeaks when you open it. The town keeps it unlocked during the day for anyone who wants to visit, then locks it at night. At least, that's what I assumed. But one morning in late October, I walked out to get the mail and noticed the gate was open. Not just unlocked, but open, swung wide like someone had pushed through it and not bothered to close it behind them. I didn't think much of it. Figured someone from the town had come by early to do maintenance and left it open. I walked over, closed it, and went about my day. The next morning, it was open again. This time, I mentioned it to Derek. He said he hadn't touched it, hadn't even been near the cemetery. I closed it again, made sure the latch caught, and watched it for a minute to make sure it stayed shut. It happened 3 more times that week. Every morning, the gate would be open, and every morning, I'd close it, and it would stay closed all day. But by the next morning, it would be open again. I started paying attention to the latch. It was old, sure, but it seemed solid, heavy, not the kind of thing that would just pop open on its own. I even tested it a few times, pulling on the gate to see if it would swing free. It didn't. Derek suggested animals, maybe a deer pushing through, or a dog. The gate was low enough that something could probably squeeze under it if it tried. That made sense to me. We get deer around here, especially in the fall when they're moving around more. I decided that was probably it, but I started noticing other things too. Small things. The way the leaves would be disturbed on the path leading into the cemetery, like someone had walked through them recently. The way certain stones seemed cleaner than others, like someone had wiped the moss off them. The way the grass near that one grave, the one with the broken angel, always looked freshly pressed, like someone had been standing there. I told myself I was imagining it, looking for patterns that weren't there. It's something I learned to watch out for in the army. When you're on edge, you start seeing threats everywhere. You have to train yourself to separate real signals from noise. This was noise. It had to be. The third thing was the flowers. It was early November when I first noticed them. I was walking past the cemetery on my way to the car, and I saw a small bouquet on one of the graves near the center. White flowers, lilies, I think, arranged neatly in a glass jar. That wasn't unusual by itself. People leave flowers on graves all the time. But something about it caught my attention. The flowers were fresh, really fresh, like they'd been placed there that morning. And the grave they were on was old. One of the oldest in the cemetery, the name worn almost completely smooth. I didn't think about it again until the next week, when I saw flowers on a different grave. Same arrangement, same glass jar, fresh white lilies. And then again, a few days later, different grave, same flowers. Over the next few weeks, I started keeping track. The flowers appeared every few days, always on a different grave, always fresh, always the same white lilies in the same glass jar. I never saw who left them, never saw a car parked nearby or a person walking through the cemetery. They would just appear, like someone was visiting in the middle of the night. I asked around at work, mentioned it casually to a couple of the older attorneys, the ones who'd been in St. Genevieve their whole lives. They didn't seem to know anything about it. One of them, a guy named Harold, who handles most of the estate work, said there were probably descendants in town who still visited the old graves. People around here have long memories, he said. Families go back generations. Wouldn't surprise me if someone's still paying respects to their great-great-grandfather. That made sense. St. Genevieve was like that. Old families, old connections. The kind of place where people remembered things that happened 200 years ago, like it was yesterday. But I kept watching. And I started to notice something else. The flowers were appearing on graves with the same death year. 1811. Every single one of them. Different names, different locations in the cemetery, but the same year carved into the stone. I counted 7 graves by the end of November. 7 people, all dead in 1811. And someone was leaving flowers on each one, in rotation, like they were working through a list. I didn't mention this to Derek. I didn't know how to explain it without sounding paranoid. And I wasn't even sure it meant anything. Probably just a coincidence. Probably just someone with a connection to that particular year, a family tragedy or a historical society project or something like that. But I started looking at those 7 graves more carefully when I walked past, reading the names, trying to piece together who they might have been. The inscriptions were faded, hard to make out, but I managed to get a few of them. Pierre Beauvais, Marie Bolduc, Antoine Vallée, Jean-Baptiste Moreau. French names, old families. The kind of people who would have been here when the town was first settled. The 7th grave, the one near the corner with the broken angel, had a name I couldn't read at all. The stone was too weathered, the letters worn smooth. But someone had left flowers on it more often than the others. I noticed that. Whoever was doing this, they spent the most time at that grave. And once, just once, I thought I saw a figure standing there. It was early one morning, just before dawn, when the light was gray and the mist was rising off the river. I was getting ready for work, and I glanced out the upstairs window, and I saw someone near the broken angel. A shape, dark against the pale stones. Standing perfectly still, I blinked, and they were gone. I told myself it was the mist, a trick of the light, the same kind of thing Derek had talked about with the convoy. Nothing real, but my hands were shaking when I tied my shoes. December came, and the temperature dropped, and the cemetery took on a different character. The trees were bare, the branches black against the gray sky. The fieldstone wall was covered in frost most mornings, and the ground was hard, unyielding. The flowers kept appearing, though less often now. White lilies, frozen at the edges, somehow still fresh. Derek noticed them too, finally. He mentioned it one evening when we were sitting on the porch, bundled up in jackets, watching the sun go down behind the stones. "Someone's been leaving flowers over there," he said. "You ever see who?" I told him I hadn't. "Weird," he said. "Same flowers every time. Lilies. My mom used to say lilies were for funerals." "They are," I said. He was quiet for a minute. Then he said, "You ever go in there, walk around?" I told him I had, a few times, just to look at the stones, read the names. He nodded, but didn't say anything else. That night, I woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of footsteps. Not inside the house. Outside, on gravel, or maybe on frozen ground. Slow, deliberate footsteps, like someone walking without any hurry. I lay in bed, listening, trying to figure out where they were coming from. The sound stopped, started again, stopped. I got up, quietly, and went to the hallway window. The cemetery was dark, the stones barely visible in the faint light from the street lamp on the corner. I couldn't see anyone, but I could still hear the footsteps, faint now, like they were moving away. I stood there for maybe 10 minutes, waiting. The sound faded. The silence came back, that heavy, rural silence that always feels louder than noise. When I went back to bed, I didn't sleep. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening. I started researching the cemetery after that. Told myself it was professional curiosity, the same instinct that made me good at my job. Tracing histories, following chains of ownership, piecing together stories from fragments. That's what I do. That's what I'm trained to do. The local historical society had records going back to the town's founding. Old ledgers, handwritten documents, maps that showed property boundaries from the 1700s. I spent a few Saturday afternoons in their archive room, a dusty basement in the old courthouse, going through boxes of papers that hadn't been touched in years. The cemetery was established in 1762, according to the earliest records. Originally just a small plot behind the church, then expanded as the town grew. By 1800, it had reached its current size, bounded by the fieldstone wall that someone had built to keep the graves separate from the surrounding farmland. I found references to the 1811 graves in a ledger from that year. A list of deaths, causes mostly listed as fever or unknown. 7 names, all within a few weeks of each other in late autumn. The same names I'd seen on the stones. There was a note in the margin, in different handwriting, added later. I had to squint to read it. These souls, not at rest. Wall built to contain. I stared at that for a long time. The wall. The fieldstone wall around the cemetery. Someone had built it to contain something. I looked for more information, but there wasn't any. The next few pages of the ledger were missing, torn out cleanly at the binding. Whatever had happened in 1811, someone had decided it didn't need to be remembered. I didn't tell Derek about what I'd found, partly because I didn't know how to explain it, and partly because I wasn't sure it meant anything. Old towns have old stories. People wrote strange things in the margins of ledgers. It didn't have to mean anything, but I started paying more attention to the wall. It was old, older than the house, older than most of the buildings in town. Fieldstone, carefully fitted, about 3 feet high. It ran all the way around the cemetery, unbroken except for the gate on the far side. I walked the perimeter one afternoon, running my hand along the stones, feeling the rough surface, the places where the mortar had crumbled and been replaced. Near the back corner, close to the grave with the broken angel, I found something carved into one of the stones. A symbol, worn almost smooth, but still visible if you knew where to look. It looked like a cross, but with an extra line through it, and circles at the ends. I didn't recognize it. I took a picture with my phone and spent an hour that night trying to find it online. The closest match I found was something called a containment sigil, used in old European folk magic to keep spirits from crossing a boundary. I closed the laptop after that, told myself it was superstition, old beliefs from people who didn't understand disease or death or the natural world. The wall was just a wall. The symbol was just a mark someone had made, probably for surveying or property boundaries or something practical. But I dreamed about it that night. The wall, the stones, the symbol. In the dream, I was standing at the boundary, and something was on the other side, pressing against it, trying to get through. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. A weight, a presence, cold and patient. I woke up sweating, even though the room was freezing. The footsteps came back. Not every night, but often enough that I stopped being surprised by them. I'd hear them sometime after midnight, that slow, deliberate pace, moving through the cemetery and then stopping near the wall, near my house. Derek heard them too. He mentioned it one morning over coffee, his face drawn, dark circles under his eyes. "Something's walking around out there," he said. "You hear it?" I nodded. "Probably deer," he said, but he didn't sound convinced. "Probably," I agreed. We didn't talk about it again, but I noticed he started locking his bedroom door at night. And I noticed he stopped sitting on the porch after dark. It was a week before Christmas when I found the first stone inside the house. I came downstairs in the morning, and there it was, sitting on the kitchen table. A small piece of fieldstone, roughly square, about the size of my palm. It looked old, weathered, with traces of mortar on one side. I picked it up, turned it over. On the bottom, barely visible, was the same symbol I'd seen on the wall. I checked all the doors, locked. I checked the windows, closed. I asked Derek if he'd brought it in for some reason, and he looked at me like I was crazy. "Why would I bring a rock into the house?" he said. I didn't have an answer. I put the stone in a drawer and tried to forget about it. But the next morning, it was on the table again. Same spot, same position. Like someone had taken it out of the drawer and placed it there while we slept. This time, I took it outside and threw it over the wall, back into the cemetery. Watched it land in the dead grass near one of the old tombs. The next morning, it was on my pillow. I want to be clear about something. I'm not a superstitious person. I don't believe in ghosts or spirits or things that go bump in the night. I've seen enough real horror in my life, the kind that comes from human beings doing terrible things to each other, to know that the supernatural is mostly just a way of explaining what we don't want to understand. But I also know what I experienced. I know what I saw and heard and felt in that house during those weeks in December and January, and I know that something was happening that I couldn't explain. The stone kept coming back. No matter where I put it, no matter how many times I threw it into the cemetery, it would appear somewhere in the house the next morning. The kitchen table, the front porch, the bathroom sink. Once I found it in my coat pocket when I got to work. Derek noticed. He didn't say anything, but I saw him looking at the stone when it appeared. Saw the way his jaw tightened, the way his hand shook when he picked up his coffee. We were both sleeping badly by then. The footsteps came almost every night, and sometimes they were accompanied by other sounds. A low humming, almost like a voice. The creak of the porch steps, even though no one was there. Once, I heard what sounded like someone trying the back door, rattling the knob, testing the lock. I started sleeping with the lights on. Derek started sleeping with his service pistol under his pillow. Neither of us talked about it. The week after Christmas, I went back to the Historical Society. I needed to know more about what had happened in 1811. I needed to understand what I was dealing with. The archivist was an older woman named Constance, who'd worked there for 30 years. She knew the town's history better than anyone. When I asked her about the 7 deaths in 1811, she got very quiet. "You're living in the old Moreau place, aren't you?" she said. I told her I was. She nodded slowly. I thought so. People don't usually ask about 1811 unless they live near the old cemetery. I asked her what she meant. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "There was a sickness that year. No one knew what it was. Started in late October after the harvest. 7 people died within 3 weeks, all from the old families, the ones who'd been here since the beginning." "What kind of sickness?" I asked. "The records don't say, just fever or unknown cause. But the stories," she paused. "The stories say it wasn't a normal sickness. The people who died, they didn't just get sick. They changed, became violent, confused. Some of them didn't recognize their own families. And after they died," she stopped, looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "After they died, what?" I said. "People saw them, walking in the cemetery at night, standing near the wall. Some folks said they tried to leave, to cross over onto the neighboring properties. That's when they built the wall higher, put the symbols on the stones, brought in a priest from New Orleans to bless the ground." I felt cold. "And that worked?" She shrugged. "The sightings stopped, for a while anyway. But every few decades, someone living near the cemetery starts asking questions, starts seeing things. Usually they move away before long." I asked her what had happened to the people who didn't move away. She didn't answer, just looked at me with those quiet eyes, and I understood. I should have left then. Any sensible person would have left, packed up, broken the lease, driven away, and never looked back. That's what Derek did. It was the 2nd week of January when he told me. We were sitting in the kitchen, not talking, just drinking coffee and listening to the silence. The stone was on the table between us. We'd both stopped trying to move it by then. "I'm going back to St. Louis," he said. "My cousin's got a room I can stay in." I nodded. I didn't blame him. "You should come," he said. "Leave this place. Whatever's going on here, it's not." He stopped, shook his head. "It's not something we can fight." I told him I'd think about it, but I didn't leave. I don't know why. Maybe I'm stubborn. Maybe I needed to understand what was happening before I could walk away. Or maybe, and this is the thought I try not to dwell on, maybe I couldn't leave. Maybe something was keeping me here. Derek was gone by the end of the week. I helped him load his truck, shook his hand, watched him drive away. He didn't look back. The house felt different after that. Emptier. The sounds at night seemed louder, the shadows deeper. I started leaving lights on in every room, running up the electric bill, but I didn't care. The darkness felt wrong, heavy, like something was waiting in it. The first time I saw her, really saw her, was the 3rd night after Derek left. I was lying in bed, not sleeping, just staring at the ceiling and listening to the familiar sounds of the house settling. The footsteps had started about an hour earlier, that slow, patient pace circling the cemetery and then stopping near the wall. Then I heard something different, a creak, like a door opening, and then footsteps inside the house. I lay perfectly still. The footsteps were soft, almost delicate, like someone walking barefoot on the hardwood floors. They moved from the back of the house toward the front, toward the stairs. I heard the first step creak, then the second, then the third. Someone was coming up. I couldn't move. I wanted to reach for my phone, to call someone, but my arms wouldn't respond. I just lay there, frozen, listening to those soft footsteps ascending the stairs. They reached the top, paused, then started moving down the hallway toward my room. The door was open. I always left it open now because closed doors made me feel trapped. So I saw her when she appeared in the doorway. A woman, young, maybe 25, with dark hair and pale skin. She was wearing a long dress, old-fashioned, the kind of thing you'd see in a museum. And she was looking at me. Her face was wrong. Not decayed or horrifying, just wrong. The proportions were off, the eyes too large, the mouth too still. And she didn't move the way a living person moves. She was just there, standing in the doorway, watching me with those two large eyes. We stared at each other for what felt like hours. I couldn't speak, couldn't scream, could barely breathe. Then she smiled. A small, sad smile. And she said, in a voice that sounded like it was coming from very far away, "You shouldn't have moved the stone." She turned and walked back down the hallway. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, going down this time, the creak of the back door, and then silence. I didn't sleep at all that night, just lay there, shaking, waiting for dawn. The stone was on my nightstand when I finally got up. I don't know how it got there. I'd left it on the kitchen table the night before, but there it was, sitting next to my phone, that small piece of fieldstone with the worn symbol on the bottom. I picked it up. It was cold, colder than it should have been. And for a moment, I felt something, a presence, like someone was standing right behind me, watching. I put the stone down and didn't touch it again. I called in sick to work that day. Spent the morning sitting in the kitchen, drinking coffee, trying to decide what to do. I thought about calling Derek, but what would I say? That I'd seen a ghost? That a dead woman had walked into my house and spoken to me? He'd think I was losing my mind. Maybe I was. I thought about calling the police, but that seemed even more absurd. What would I report? An intruder who vanished into thin air? Footsteps that came from nowhere? In the end, I did the only thing I could think of. I went to the cemetery. It was a gray day, cold, the sky heavy with clouds that threatened snow. I walked through the gate, which was open as always, and made my way between the stones until I reached the grave with the broken angel. The flowers were there, white lilies, fresh, still beaded with morning dew. The glass jar was exactly where it always was, positioned just so. I looked at the stone. The inscription was worn, almost illegible, but I'd brought a piece of paper and a pencil. I knelt down and rubbed the paper against the stone, trying to get an impression of the letters. It took a while. The stone was old, the carving shallow, but eventually I could make out the words. Marie Claire Moreau, 1786 to 1811. Beloved daughter and wife. Moreau, the same name as my house. I sat back on my heels, staring at the stone. Marie Claire Moreau. She'd lived in my house. She'd died in 1811, the same year as the others. And now she was visiting me, walking through my rooms at night, leaving stones on my pillow. Why? I stayed in the cemetery for a long time, thinking. The cold seeped through my jacket, my jeans, my boots. By the time I stood up, I could barely feel my feet, but I had an idea. I went back to the Historical Society that afternoon. Constance was there, as always, sorting through boxes in the basement. She looked up when I came in, and something in her expression shifted, like she'd been expecting me. "You saw her," she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. She set down the box she was holding and gestured for me to sit. "Tell me what happened." I told her everything. The footsteps, the stone, the woman in my doorway, the name on the grave. She listened without interrupting, her face calm, unreadable. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Marie-Claire Moreau was the youngest daughter of Jean-Baptiste Moreau, one of the founding families. She married Antoine Val in 1808. They lived in the house you're renting now." "What happened to her?" I asked. "She was one of the 7 who died in 1811. The sickness took her in early November. She was 25 years old." 25. The woman I'd seen had looked about that age. "There were stories about her," Constance continued, "more than the others. People said she didn't rest easily after she died, that she kept coming back to the house looking for something. Her husband moved away within a year. Couldn't stand living there anymore." "Looking for what?" I asked. Constance shook her head. "No one knows. The stories don't say. But every few decades, someone in that house starts seeing things, starts finding stones where they shouldn't be. And eventually they either leave or..." She paused. "Or what?" "Or they become part of the story," she said quietly. I felt cold again. "What does that mean?" She looked at me for a long moment. "The 7 who died in 1811, they weren't just sick. The priest who came from New Orleans, he said they'd been touched by something old, something that was here before the town, before the settlers, maybe before anyone. He said the only way to contain it was to bind them to the land, to make sure they couldn't cross the wall." "The symbols," I said. She nodded. "The symbols, the wall, the prayers. They were all meant to keep the dead in their place. And for the most part, it worked. The 7 stay in the cemetery. They walk at night, but they don't leave." "But Marie-Claire was different. She died in the house, not in the cemetery. They buried her with the others, put up the wall, carved the symbols. But part of her stayed behind, in the house, in the land itself." I thought about the stone that kept appearing in my house. The same stone, from the same wall. A piece of the barrier that was supposed to keep the dead contained. "When I moved the stone," I said slowly, "I broke something. Didn't I?" Constance didn't answer, but I could see it in her eyes. I'd done something wrong, something that couldn't be undone. I stayed in the house. I know that sounds crazy. Anyone with sense would have left, would have run as far and as fast as they could. But I couldn't. I kept telling myself it was because I had a lease, because I had a job, because I didn't have anywhere else to go. But the truth was simpler than that. I couldn't leave because she wouldn't let me. Every time I tried to pack, something would go wrong. I'd get dizzy, lose track of what I was doing, find myself sitting on the porch hours later with no memory of how I'd gotten there. I'd start the car to drive away, and the engine would die. I'd pick up the phone to call someone, and the call wouldn't connect. She was keeping me there, waiting for something. The visits became more frequent. Every night now, I'd hear the footsteps on the stairs, see her standing in the doorway. Sometimes she'd just watch me. Other times, she'd speak. "You need to fix it," she'd say. "You need to put it back." The stone. She wanted me to put the stone back in the wall. But when I tried, it wouldn't stay. I'd wedge it into the gap where it belonged, press it into the mortar, and the next morning it would be back in the house. On the table. On my pillow. In my hand when I woke up. Something else was happening too. Something I didn't want to admit. The wall was crumbling. Every day, there were more gaps, more stones lying on the ground. The symbols were wearing away, faster than they should have, and the footsteps in the cemetery were getting closer to the house. I could hear them now, right outside my window. standing there in the dark, waiting. It was early February when I found the document. I'd been going through boxes in the attic, looking for anything that might help me understand what was happening. The attic was full of old things left behind by previous tenants, junk mostly, but also some older items that seemed to have been there for decades. In a wooden crate near the back, I found a leather journal. The cover was cracked, the pages yellow and brittle. But the writing inside was still legible. It was a diary, Marie-Claire Moreau's diary. I spent 3 days reading it. Most of it was ordinary, the daily concerns of a young woman in early 19th century Missouri. Her marriage to Antoine, their first year in the house, her hopes for children, for a long life, for happiness. But the last entries were different. October 15th, 1811. Something is wrong. I feel it in the air, in the earth. Antoine says I'm imagining things, but I'm not. There's something out there, in the old burial ground. Something that's been waiting. October 22nd. Pierre Beauvais is dead. They say it was fever, but I saw him the day before he died. He wasn't sick. He was afraid. He kept saying, "They're coming back. They're all coming back." October 28th. Marie Bolduc died last night. Antoine won't let me leave the house. He says it's not safe, but I don't think the house is safe either. I hear things at night. Footsteps, voices. They're calling my name. November 2nd. I'm sick now. I can feel it spreading through me, cold and dark. But it's not just a sickness. There's something else, something old. It wants to come through, and it's using us to do it, using the dead. November 5th. This will be my last entry. I know I'm going to die, but I'm not afraid anymore. I understand now. The old ones, the ones who were here before, they never left. They're in the ground, in the stones, in the very earth we walk on. And they want to come back. We were just the door, the 7 of us. We opened it, and now it can never be fully closed. If you're reading this, whoever you are, don't move the stones. Don't break the wall. The symbols are all that's keeping them in. If the wall falls, they'll come through, all of them. And they won't just walk in the cemetery anymore. They'll walk everywhere. Marie-Claire Moreau, November 5th, 1811. I put the diary down. My hands were shaking. The wall was falling. The stones were coming loose. The symbols were wearing away. And every night, the footsteps were getting closer. I started repairing the wall the next day. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't have priest training or ancient knowledge, or any real understanding of what I was dealing with. But I could fix a wall. I could gather the fallen stones and fit them back into place. I could mix mortar and fill the gaps. I worked all day, from dawn until dark. The cold bit through my gloves and my fingers went numb, but I kept going. Stone by stone, section by section, I rebuilt what had crumbled. And every night, Marie-Claire watched me. She'd stand by the broken angel, still and silent, those 2 large eyes following my movements. Sometimes she'd nod like she approved. Other times, she'd shake her head, and I'd realize I'd placed a stone wrong, and I'd have to do it again. The other 6 watched too. I saw them for the first time during that week, shadowy figures standing among the graves. Pierre Beauvais, a tall man with hollow eyes. Marie Bolduc, a woman who looked like she was made of mist. The others, names I knew from the stones, faces I'd never seen until now. They didn't approach me. They just watched, waiting to see if I could fix what I'd broken. It took me 10 days. 10 days of work, barely sleeping, barely eating. But when I fitted the last stone into place, when I traced the symbol onto its surface with shaking fingers, something changed. The air felt lighter, the silence felt less heavy, and the footsteps that night didn't come close to the house. They stayed in the cemetery, circling, but never approaching the wall. Marie Claire came to me one last time that night. She stood in my doorway, looking at me with those strange, sad eyes. "Thank you," she said. "The door is closed again. For now." "For now?" I said. She smiled, that small, sad smile. "Walls don't last forever. Nothing does. But you've bought time, years, maybe decades. That's more than most people get." She started to turn away. Then she paused. "The stone," she said. "Keep it. It's not part of the wall anymore. It's part of you now. It will help you remember. It will help you know when the wall needs fixing again." She was gone before I could respond. Gone like she'd never been there at all. That was 3 months ago. I'm still in the house, still working my job, still living my quiet, ordinary life in this quiet, ordinary town. Derek calls sometimes. He never asks about the cemetery. I never mention it. The wall is holding. I check it every morning, walk the perimeter, look for cracks. So far, there haven't been any. The symbols are clear on the stones. The gate stays closed. The flowers still appear on the graves sometimes, but I've stopped wondering who leaves them. The stone is on my nightstand. I look at it every night before I fall asleep. It's still cold, still heavy, but it doesn't move anymore. It stays where I put it, like a reminder, like a promise. I don't see Marie Claire anymore. I don't hear the footsteps. The cemetery is quiet, peaceful. Just old stones and old names, and the wind rustling through the bare branches of the oak tree. But sometimes, late at night, I'll wake up and feel like someone's watching me. I'll look toward the window, toward the cemetery, and I'll see movement near the wall. A figure standing, waiting. I tell myself it's nothing, just shadows, just my imagination. But I get up anyway, put on my coat, grab my flashlight, walk out to the wall and check the stones, run my hand along the mortar, make sure everything's still in place. It always is. So far, Constance told me something the last time I saw her. She said the people who live near the cemetery have a responsibility, not just to the town, not just to the living, but to the dead, to the barrier that keeps them where they belong. Some walls are meant to stand forever, she said, and someone has to make sure they do. I think about that a lot. About the 7 who died in 1811. About Marie Claire, who came back night after night, trying to warn me, trying to get me to understand. About the old ones, the things that were here before, the things that are waiting in the earth. The wall is holding. But walls don't last forever. Nothing does. So I keep watching, keep checking, keep the stone on my nightstand and the symbol in my memory. And every night, before I fall asleep, I look toward the cemetery and I whisper the same words. Stay where you are. Stay behind the wall. Some mornings, when the light is gray and the mist is rising, I could swear I see her near the broken angel, a young woman in an old dress, watching me with those sad, knowing eyes. And I could swear she nods, like a promise, like a warning, like she's saying, I will, as long as the wall holds. It's been a quiet winter. The snow came late this year, and when it finally fell, it covered the cemetery in white. The stones looked peaceful, almost pretty, their sharp edges softened by the drifts. I walked through one morning, the cold biting at my face, and I didn't feel anything watching me. Just silence, just the crunch of my boots in the snow. But spring is coming. I can feel it in the air, in the way the days are getting longer. The ground will thaw soon. The earth will shift. And I wonder sometimes what will happen then, if the wall will hold, if the door will stay closed, if Marie Claire will need to walk again, to find someone who will listen. I try not to think about it too much. I have a job to do, a life to live. The cemetery is just part of the landscape now, just part of my view from the porch. But I never forget what's under those stones, what's waiting behind that wall, what was here before any of us, and what will be here long after we're gone. Some nights, when I can't sleep, I take the stone from my nightstand and hold it in my palm. It's cold, always cold, even in the warmest room. And I can feel something in it. A vibration, almost. A hum. Like something breathing, like something waiting. I put it back, close my eyes, and I wait for morning. The last thing I want to say is this. If you ever find yourself living near an old cemetery, in an old town, in a house with a history no one wants to talk about, pay attention, watch the walls, listen to the silence. And if you find a stone where it shouldn't be, a stone that keeps coming back no matter how many times you move it, don't throw it away. Put it back where it belongs, because some boundaries aren't meant to be crossed. Some walls aren't meant to fall, and some of the dead don't stay dead just because you stop believing in them. Last week, I noticed a new crack in the wall, small, barely visible, near the corner where the broken angel stands. I fixed it that same day, mixed the mortar, pressed the stone into place, traced the symbol with my finger. But this morning, when I walked the perimeter, the crack was back. A little longer now, a little wider. The stone was on my pillow when I woke up. I haven't moved it. I'm not going to move it. I'm just going to watch and wait and hope the wall holds for another night. The flowers on Marie Claire's grave are fresh this morning. White lilies, beaded with dew. No footprints in the snow around them. No sign of who left them there. I don't ask anymore. I don't need to know. Some questions are better left unanswered. Some doors are better left closed. And some stories don't have endings, just pauses, long and quiet, before the next chapter begins. I'm still here. The wall is still standing. But sometimes, in the deepest part of the night, I hear footsteps on the stairs. And I know, with a certainty I can't explain, that the door isn't closed forever. Just for now. The boundary was never meant to keep anyone out. It was always meant to keep something in. And the only thing between that something and everything else is a wall made of fieldstone, a handful of symbols, and the people who remember why they matter. I remember. And as long as I'm here, as long as I'm watching, the wall will hold. But I won't be here forever. No one is. And when I'm gone, someone else will have to take my place. Someone else will have to find the stone, read the diary, understand what's buried under those graves. Someone else will have to keep the dead where they belong. I hope they're ready. I hope they're stronger than me. Because the cracks are spreading, the symbols are fading, and every night, the footsteps are getting closer. The wall is holding, for now. My name is Vanessa, and I'm from Galena, Illinois. I work as a genealogist. I spend my days in the county courthouse basement, flipping through birth certificates and land deeds and marriage licenses that smell like old glue and dust. People hire me to find their great-grandparents, to prove they're related to someone famous, to sort out who inherited what. It's slow work. I like that. You can't rush paper. You sit with it. You read the handwriting. You learn the loops and dips of a dead person's signature. I start at 8 and leave at 4:30. I bring a thermos of tea and a sandwich in a brown bag. The sandwich is usually turkey on wheat. I guess I'm a creature of habit. I live in a narrow 2-story house on a street that dead ends at the river. My cousin, Marcus, moved in 6 months ago. He took a job at the paper mill outside town and needed a place. We get along fine. He's quiet, keeps his stuff in his room, pays rent on time. We split the grocery bill. He cooks pasta on Tuesdays. I do the dishes. We watch the news sometimes and comment on the weather. It's not exciting, it's just stable. I like stable. Across the street is the cemetery. It's modest, 1870s, ivy covered. A stone wall runs along the sidewalk, about waist high, moss growing in the cracks. The graves are sunken in spots, little dips in the earth like the ground is tired. One grave is set apart from the others, maybe 20 feet from the main cluster, under a birch tree that leans a little. The headstone is simple, just a name and dates. I can see it from my kitchen window when I'm doing dishes. The ivy climbs the stone wall and spills over onto the grass. In the morning, the sun hits the birch and makes shadows that move slow across the stones. At night, the streetlight on the corner casts a yellow glow that makes everything look the same, like the whole block is holding its breath. Galena is that kind of town. Old brick buildings, tourist shops on Main Street, a river that cuts through everything. People come for the history, they buy fudge, they leave. The locals know each other. Pete at the hardware store remembers your dad. The woman at the bakery, Linda, asks about your mom's hip. It's quiet. You hear the train whistle at night, far off. You hear dogs barking 2 blocks over, then they stop. You hear the river when the wind is right. It's not a place where things happen fast. The cemetery has always been part of that quiet. It's just there, like the river, like the hills. The first thing I noticed was the gate. The cemetery has a wrought iron gate in the stone wall, latched but not locked. One morning it was open, just a few inches, enough to let a person slip through. I figured the groundskeeper had been there early. I walked past it on my way to work, pulled it shut, and didn't think about it. That was a Tuesday. Wednesday, it was open again. Wider this time. I stopped and looked at the latch. It wasn't broken. It just hadn't been closed. I clicked it shut and went on. Marcus mentioned it that night. He said he'd seen it open when he got home from his shift. Probably kids, he said. Teens with nothing better to do. He was stirring sauce on the stove. I nodded. Probably kids. Then the flowers started, small bundles, tied with string, left on that one grave set apart. Not every day, but often enough that I noticed. Daisies, black-eyed Susans, things you'd pick from a field. They looked fresh, like they'd been cut that morning. I watched from the window while I ate my cereal. I saw a woman there once from a distance. She was just a shape, wearing a dark coat. She bent down, placed the flowers, and walked away toward the river. I couldn't see her face. I told myself she was a relative. People do that. They leave flowers. The porch light started acting up. It would flicker, not a lot, just a quick blink. I'd be reading and it would go dark for a second, then come back. I changed the bulb, checked the wiring. It seemed fine. Marcus said the house is old, wiring's old, happens all the time. He's probably right. One night, I heard my name. I was in the kitchen, washing up after dinner. The window was open a crack. The voice was soft, like someone speaking from the street. Vanessa. Just once. I turned off the water and listened. Nothing. The crickets were loud. The river was loud. I told myself it was the wind, or a neighbor calling a cat. There are a lot of cats in this neighborhood. I started keeping a notebook. It's what I do for work, so it felt natural. I'd write down the date, the time, what I saw. Octi 12, 7:15 a.m., gate open. Octi 14, flowers on lone grave. Octi 16, porch light blinked at 11:34 p.m. It helped, made it feel manageable, like data. Data is neutral. Marcus started joking about it. He'd come home and say, "Gate open again, flowers fresh." He'd grin, I'd grin back. It was our little thing. But I noticed he started locking his bedroom door at night. He never used to do that. I didn't ask why. I didn't want to make it a thing. The woman with the flowers came more often. Always early morning. Always the same coat. Always walking away toward the river. I tried to get a better look once. I stepped out on the porch with my coffee. She was already leaving. She didn't turn around. Just walked. The way she moved was strange. Not fast, not slow. Just steady, like she knew exactly where she was going and it wasn't any of my business. I asked Linda at the bakery if she knew who left flowers at the cemetery. She was boxing up my usual cinnamon roll. She paused, then said, "Oh, probably family. There's always family." She didn't look at me. She looked at the roll. Some folks have long memories. I asked what she meant. She just smiled and handed me the box. Enjoy your roll, honey. I went to the courthouse on my lunch break and pulled the old cemetery records. Genealogist Habit. I wanted to see who was buried in that lone grave. The name on the stone was Eleanor Vance. Died 1879. The records showed a plot purchase in 1878, but the details were sparse. No next of kin listed, just a name and a date, and a note in the margin I could barely read. It looked like see domestic roster. I'd never seen that notation before. I asked Claire, the clerk, about it. She's been there forever, knows every file. She looked at the record, then at me. Domestic roster's not public, she said. It's just old housekeeping. I asked what that meant. She shrugged. People kept track of things differently back then. Servants, boarders, that kind of thing. She closed the book. Probably nothing you need to worry about. But I did worry. It's my job to worry about names and dates and connections. I went home and pulled up the digitized city directories for the 1870s. I searched for Eleanor Vance. Nothing. No Vance family in Galena in that decade. No mention in the newspapers. It was like she appeared just to be buried. The gate kept opening. I started closing it every morning. It became part of my routine. Coffee, cereal, close the gate, go to work. Some mornings I'd find it already shut. Those mornings felt like a small victory, like I'd imagined the whole thing. But then I'd come home and it would be open again. Not wide, just ajar. Marcus stopped joking about it. One night he came home from his shift, and his face was pale. I asked what was wrong. He said he'd seen someone sitting on that bench, just sitting, not moving. He'd slowed down as he drove past, and the figure hadn't looked up. It was weird, he said, like they were waiting for something. I asked if it was the woman in the coat. He shook his head. Could have been, couldn't see the face. I started dreaming about the cemetery. Not scary dreams, just dreams where I'm walking through it and the stones are all blank. No names, just smooth marble. And I'm looking for something, but I don't know what. I wake up tired, like I've been walking all night. The porch light got worse. It would blink 3 times, pause, then blink again. I called an electrician. He checked everything, said the wiring was old but functional. Probably a loose connection, he said. Could be the fixture itself. He replaced the fixture. It still blinked. He shrugged. Ghosts in the machine, he joked. I didn't laugh. I started noticing other things. The birch tree across the street seemed to lean more. The ivy on the stone wall grew faster on one side. The sunken graves looked deeper. I know that sounds crazy. Ground doesn't sink that fast, but I swear, looking at them every day, they seemed lower, like the earth was pulling them in. One Saturday, I decided to walk through the cemetery. Just walk. See it up close. Marcus came with me. We strolled the gravel paths. The stones were old. Some were so worn you couldn't read them. The ivy was thick in places, crawling up the walls, over the stones. We got to the lone grave, the one under the birch. The flowers were fresh, white daisies this time. The stone was clean, like someone had been scrubbing it. I touched the top. It was warm from the sun, but the ground around it was cold. Not just cool, cold, like the earth beneath was frozen. Marcus noticed it too. He knelt down, put his hand on the grass. That's weird, he said. Rest of the yard is warm. I nodded. We stood there for a minute, not saying anything. Then we walked home. Neither of us looked back. That night, the porch light blinked in a pattern. 3 blinks, pause, 3 blinks. I watched it from the living room. Marcus came out of his room and stood next to me. That's new, he said. We both watched. It kept going. 3 blinks, pause, 3 blinks, like a signal, like someone saying, I'm here. I turned off the light. The dark felt better. The next morning, the gate was wide open, not just ajar, wide. I stood on my porch with my coffee and looked at it. The birch tree's leaves were turning early, yellow and dropping. The bench was angled differently, turned more toward my house. I hadn't noticed that before. It was subtle, but it was turned, like someone had been sitting there, watching, and had shifted it without thinking. I walked over. The flowers were fresh. The stone was warm again, but the ground was colder. I could feel it through my shoes. I looked at my house from that spot. I could see my kitchen window. I could see Marcus's bedroom window. I could see the porch. I felt exposed, like I'd been on display. I went to work and pulled every file I could find on the house I live in. Built in 1868, owned by a family named Vance. The same name on the stone. I found a deed transfer in 1879, the same year Eleanor died. The house had been sold to a new family. The Vances had moved away. No forwarding address. No record of where they went. I asked Claire about the Vance family. She looked at me over her glasses. Old family, she said. Lived here a long time. Then they didn't. She handed me a folder. Inside was a photograph, blurry, of a woman standing on a porch, my porch. The date on the back, 1878. The woman was wearing a dark dress, high collar. Her face was shadowed, but I could see her hands. They were folded in front of her, like she was waiting. I took the photo home. Marcus was in the kitchen. I spread it on the table. We both looked at it. That's our house, he said. I nodded. That's the year before she died, I said. We didn't say anything else. We just looked at the woman on the porch. That night, I heard steps on the gravel path in the cemetery. Not loud, just there. A rhythm. 1, 2, 3. Pause. 1, 2, 3. I got out of bed and went to the window. The moon was out. I could see the birch tree, the bench, the stone. I could see a shape moving along the path, not walking fast, just moving. It stopped at the lone grave. It bent down. It stood up. It walked toward the gate. It stopped at the gate and looked at my house. I couldn't see a face, just a shape. Then it turned and walked back to the bench and sat down. I watched for an hour. It didn't move. It just sat, facing my house, facing my window. The next morning, there were flowers. Not on the grave, on my porch, a small bundle tied with string. Daisies. I picked them up. They were cold, like they'd been in a freezer. I put them in a vase. I don't know why. It felt rude to throw them away. Marcus saw them. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me. I looked back. We both knew we were past the point of jokes. I called the groundskeeper. His name is Frank. He's been taking care of the cemetery for 30 years. I asked him about the gate. He said, "Yeah, that gate does that. Always has." I asked about the flowers. He said, "Someone's relative, I guess. I don't ask." I asked about the bench. He paused. "That bench has been there a long time," he said. "People sit." I asked if he'd ever seen anyone sitting there at night. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I don't work nights." I went to the library. I looked up old newspapers. I found an obituary for Eleanor Vance. It was short. Eleanor Vance, age 24, died of fever. No mention of family. No mention of where she lived, just that she died. The funeral notice said, "Services at the house." No address, but I knew the house. It was my house. I went back to the courthouse. I pulled the death certificate. Cause of death, fever of unknown origin. The attending physician was Dr. James Vance. Same last name. I looked him up. He was her father. He'd lived in the house. He'd sold it the year after she died. He moved to Chicago. No record of him after that. I asked Claire about Dr. Vance. She pulled a file. He was a prominent man, she said. Lost his daughter, left town. She handed me a letter. It was from Dr. Vance to the town clerk, dated 1880. It said, I have fulfilled my obligations. The arrangements are permanent. Please ensure the bench remains. That's all it said. No explanation, just that. I took the letter home. Marcus read it over my shoulder. What arrangements? He asked. I didn't know. I still don't. That night, the porch light blinked 3 times. Then it stayed on. I went to the window. The shape was at the gate. It pushed it open. It walked across the street. It walked up my driveway. It stopped at the porch steps. It looked up at my window. I couldn't move. I just stood there, watching. Then it turned and walked back to the cemetery. It sat on the bench. It faced my house. I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark and watched the bench. The shape didn't move. It just sat, like it was waiting for something, or someone. The next morning, I found a note on my kitchen table. I hadn't put it there. Marcus hadn't either. It was small, yellowed paper. The handwriting was neat, old-fashioned. It said, "She likes to watch the house. Please leave the light on." I showed it to Marcus. He went pale. "This isn't funny," he said. I agreed. It wasn't. I called Frank again. I told him about the note. He sighed. "I told you I don't work nights," he said. "But I've heard things. Old men talk." He paused. "They say Dr. Vance made a deal. They say his daughter wasn't quite done. They say the bench is for her, so she can see the house, so she can remember." I asked what that meant. He said, "I don't know. I just keep the grass cut." I went to Ruth, the town clerk. She's older, has been here forever. I showed her the note. She read it, then folded it and gave it back. "You live in that house on River Street," she said. Not a question. I nodded. She looked out her window. "Dr. Vance was a man of science," she said. "But he was also a man of grief. He did what he thought would keep her close." She turned to me. "The cemetery records aren't complete. Some things were private arrangements." I asked what kind of arrangements. She looked at me for a long time. "The kind where a father can't let go," she said. "The kind where a daughter stays near." I went home. Marcus was packing. He said he couldn't stay. He said he was sorry. He left that night. I didn't blame him. I wanted to leave too. But it's my house. It's my job. It's my life. You don't just walk away from those things because of a few weird notes and some flowers. I started sleeping with the lights on. All of them. The house felt too dark otherwise. The porch light blinked less when the inside lights were on. I think that means something. I'm not sure what. The woman in the coat still comes, always early morning. Sometimes I see her face now. It's young, pale. She looks like the photograph. She looks like Eleanor. She places the flowers. She sits on the bench. She watches the house. I don't go out anymore. Not at night, not early morning. I watch from the window. I write in my notebook. City 30, 6:45 a.m., flowers fresh. Octat 31, 1:07 a.m., light blinked 3 times. Novi 1, shape at gate. The gate is always open now. I stopped closing it. What's the point? It opens anyway. Yesterday, I found a book on my porch. It was old, leather-bound. Inside, on the first page, it said, Eleanor Vance, her journal. I opened it. The pages were blank. All of them. Blank. But the cover was worn, like it had been held. Like someone had carried it. I took it inside. I put it on the table. I sat across from it and drank my tea. I didn't open it again. I didn't need to. Last night, I heard footsteps on the porch. Not just one pair. 2. One heavy, one light. Like a father and a daughter, like Dr. Vance and Eleanor. They stopped at the door. I didn't move. I sat in my chair and stared at the door, and waited. The doorknob didn't turn. The footsteps didn't leave. They just stopped. Then the porch light blinked 3 times. Then silence. I called Frank this morning. I asked him to move the bench. He said he couldn't. It's part of the plot, he said. It's been there since 1879. I can't just move it. I asked about the gate. He said, some things are supposed to be open. I asked about the woman. He said, I don't work nights. I hung up. I sat on my porch. The bench faced my house. The flowers were fresh. The gate was open. The sun was out, but the ground around the lone grave was still cold. I could feel it from here. I went inside. I locked the door. I locked the windows. I turned on all the lights. I sat in the middle of the living room and waited. The journal on the table opened. By itself. Just a little. Just enough to show a page. It was still blank. But there was a smell, like old perfume, like flowers left too long in water. The porch light blinked 3 times. Pause. 3 times. I didn't move. I just watched the journal. I watched the page. I waited for words to appear. They didn't. But the smell got stronger, and the air got colder. And I could hear breathing. Soft, like a girl, like Eleanor. I stood up. I walked to the window. The bench was empty. The gate was open. The flowers were on my porch. The woman in the coat was standing at the end of my driveway, looking at me. She raised a hand, not a wave, just raised it, like she was showing me something, like she was pointing. I looked where she pointed, at the house, at my house, at the window I was standing in, at me. I stepped back. I pulled the curtain. I sat down. I didn't look again. The journal is still on the table. The pages are still blank. The smell is gone, but the porch light keeps blinking, and the gate stays open, and the flowers keep coming. I don't know what Dr. Vance did. I don't know what arrangement he made. I don't know why Eleanor stays. I only know that this is my house now, and she knows that, and her father knew that, and the town knows that, and nobody talks about it because talking makes it real. I keep the porch light on, facing the stones. The fence was never meant to keep anyone out.